Okay, everybody, it looks like we are live. Welcome to our live career change Q&A event. I'm going to give it, it's just a couple minutes early, so I will give it maybe 2 minutes, and then I will go ahead and introduce ourselves, or we will introduce ourselves, and then we'll get right into the topic. If you are just joining us, feel free to drop your name and where you're from in the chat. And I am just going to double check that my comments are posting the places that I want it to. Okay. All righty. So looks like we are happening now. Oh, good. And our live captioning is starting. So I'm going to make a chat here in LinkedIn. And we will see if folks join us, and we will start in about 1 minute.
Hello, Janelle. Janelle's with us.
Yay, Janelle's here. She's on YouTube. Yeah, good catch, Aaron. Thanks for joining us, Janelle. And Aaron, I will just go ahead and try to manage the LinkedIn comments.
Okay.
If you can manage the ones here or keep an eye on them, that would be great. All righty. Oh, I forget there's a delay. Hey, Tina. Tina's, well, I don't know if you've met Tina, Aaron, but Tina's on one of my episodes.
I watched the episode, so welcome, Tina.
Yeah, no, Tina, you did not have to submit anything. It's just if people wanted to, so that I could be sure that I got them and kind of organize them. So not to worry at all. I'm just checking all of the platforms, and it's weird to see myself in multiple places. But okay, we will go ahead and get started. It doesn't tell us. Oh, it does say. Okay, so we've got a couple of folks with us, and we want to get started talking about personal branding. And the two folks that have joined us know one or both of us. But because this is being recorded, we're going to go ahead and include introductions. Tina, feel free to pop your question in anytime. Especially with not so many people here live, we can definitely start with your questions. So I want to start by showing a PowerPoint. And as always, Aaron, you know to jump in and over the top of what I'm saying if need be to keep me on track. Let's see here. 1 second. I want to double check the LinkedIn page. It looks like we're getting some comments. Okay. All righty. So again, welcome to the Live Career Change Q&A. My name's Carol Redden, and with me is Aaron Torres. Tony Coates will be joining us in just a minute. For those who are watching and haven't yet met me, I have about 20 years of experience, a little more than 20 years of experience in higher education and coaching and training, professional development, that sort of thing. I've taught, at this point, hundreds and hundreds of people about resume writing, cover letters, interviewing, personal branding, all of the things that would go into the career change process. And I've taught a few classes on those concepts as well. In addition, I was a director of career services for 4 years, and all of that experience just helped put me in a position to talk with hundreds of employers, HR managers, recruiters, and figure out what it is that they want from candidates, what they were not getting. And then obviously I do research and I stay up to date with the trends to make sure that I'm helping people change with the times, if you will. This event came about just because people were asking. Lots of people were asking me to help them or their kids or neighbors or friends. And I thought, well, let me just go ahead and put this together to try to help as many people as possible. And so that's what brings me here today. And as I mentioned, my co-host, Aaron Torres, who's with me now, he and I worked together for a few years. And we facilitated seminars just like this for students at one of the colleges. And we found that it was just very helpful. The people who attended had great feedback for us. And you'll see that we've organized the sessions today intentionally based on all the things that somebody would need to really make the most of a career change process. We're not just talking about resume writing. So I should mention my degrees are in communication now that I'm going back just a little bit. But outside of that, let me turn it over to Aaron if you want to give us a brief introduction as well. As I mentioned, Tony will join us later, and then we'll get right into it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Carol. My name is Aaron Torres, as Carol stated earlier, and I have about 15 years of experience in higher education. So helping people with professional development, coaching. Before that, I was a personal trainer, strength and conditioning coach, so fitness and wellness professional as well. So coaching in that arena, something that I enjoy. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. So thanks for having me, Carol.
Yeah, thank you. And Aaron, as always, does a great job of sometimes bringing me back to topics if I've gone too far or if I'm too high level, thinking that I filled in the gaps when I haven't. So very grateful to have him here with me. We're not going to have the slides up the entire time, but I just want to talk a little bit about what does it mean to change your channel. That's the company that I've recently started. And I'll explain just very quickly how it ties into our conversation today. But the channel is the way in which we communicate with other people or exchange energy, kind of like watching television. It's whatever you're tuning into. And what I think most people don't realize, and this addresses one of the questions already that came in from Tina, is when you ask, well, how do I make a career change, or how do I decide what my next steps are, or whether it's career related or personal related, to change your channel means to change your thoughts, your feelings, and actions so that you can experience the world in the way that you want to. And so as it relates to today's topic, start by changing your thoughts and how you feel so that then you know what kind of action to take. And I'll elaborate more on that. But change your channel, as I said, could be used in any area of life, really. I know, Aaron, this plays into probably when you work with people in the health and wellness capacity. It isn't just about, hey, get in the gym and, then your life will change. There's a thought process that has to change. You have to get people excited about working out, or at least motivated, so their feelings, and then they actually have to get to the gym in order for that life change to happen. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that does sound correct. And also, in response to Tina, I think the order in which these main points will be addressed today, I think after today you would actually find out where a good start is. So I think in the work that Carol has done, she organizes these main points in a specific order, and usually it just starts a conversation with ourselves. So
absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that. And Nathan, I appreciate your feedback too about the audio. I just closed out some tabs. So if you could let me know if that helps the audio on your end, that would be great. I think it's because I was logged into LinkedIn and I'm here on this other platform. So we're talking about, for any lifelong change, it's got to be inclusive of all three of these things. And it is a little reminiscent of The Secret, but what I think is The Secret generally talks about just change your thoughts and hope good things, and then you'll have some life change. And so this is just a little bit expanded on that. So again, the first topic that we're going to talk about today is personal branding. I think it's the topic that most people skip over in the career change process. Either they don't know about it or they don't understand why it's important, but that's why I've placed it first, as Aaron mentioned. For those who can stick around or want to come back, we'll talk about job searching strategies from 10 to 11, and then resume and cover letter writing from 11 to 12, and interviewing from 12 to 1. So with regard to personal branding, hi, Mom, I see that you're here too, so I didn't want to skip over that. As far as the personal brand goes, I don't know if anybody listening knows what a personal brand is. Feel free to put in the chat if you do. But most of the time when I ask folks, what's a brand, they go, I don't really know. And I said, well, what's your brand? And again, they don't know. I would say, think about your personal brand, excuse me, like the story that you're communicating with others on a continual basis, and even with yourself. It encompasses everything you're doing and not doing. So things that would play into your brand would be how you're dressing, to what degree are you maybe more or less professional in terms of the language or the way you dress or the words you use. For example, the way you present yourself on social media, that plays into your brand because it communicates something about you. How you handle situations. And usually if I tell people, even if that part's not making sense, and I say, okay, well, think about, and I'm going to relate this, of course, to the career change process. If you think about brands like Oreo, there's an off brand that you could buy oftentimes at the dollar store or lots of stores, right? It looks like Oreo and it tastes similar to Oreo. But in most cases, if those two products were the same price, more often than not, people would choose the Oreo. And that's because they know what goes with the brand. They know what it looks like, what it tastes like, what the experience will be. And that's going to be also true for an employer. An employer looking for a candidate is going to ideally want to know from everything you do and don't do as part of the career change process, they're going to want to get to know your brand. And the better job you can do at communicating your brand, the better job you have at getting the job. Okay. So that's why we talk about, oh, thanks, Tina. That's why we talk about starting with a personal brand, because Tina said, where would I go to find something or for a friend? You know, if a friend were going to change industries, and I know at least one other person on our call asked about this, I'm thinking of changing industries. The first step would be for you to identify your brand. And you both, the folks who are with me, may have already done this, but for other people watching, maybe not. Erin, as always, jump in with examples or slow me down if I need to. But most often people have not identified their brand. So I would encourage you to either pause this or right now while I'm talking, take some minutes and write down 10 or 12 things that describe you, your characteristics. So Erin, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you what you might say. But what I might say would be, I like to think of myself as professional, hardworking, caring, creative, not super technical. That's part of my brand. I would say maybe a good balance between professional, but also engaging, things like that. And the better idea I have of what my brand is, then I know how to communicate that to an employer, right? If you don't know what your brand includes, one thing you could do is ask other people to describe you. Friends and family, you can't try not to get mad at them if they say things that you don't agree with because you've asked for their perspective. But if you see yourself as professional and you ask 4 or 5 people who only know you from social media and they see that you're out partying or I don't know, just whatever, they're going to have a different perception of your brand, right, than you do, because you know all of you. And we'll talk more about social media in a little bit when we talk about managing your brand. But that's one way you can start, right, would be really think about who are you, what's important to you, what are your strengths, what are some skills that you have. Oh, no worry, Nathan. We're just talking about, I was talking a little bit about something that you had asked earlier in terms of if somebody were going to make a career change and transition their skills. The first step I would say is really think about your brand. Make sure you understand it, because if you don't, nobody else will. Erin, what would you say about your personal brand?
Very similar to to yours, Carol, with the exception of creative. I don't view myself as a creative person.
You don't?
On professional, hardworking, holistic. I like to take a deep dive, and I'm a thinker. I like to stay active and lead a healthy lifestyle. So those are some things that would describe me. But obviously, a lot of people here, they might know me, but a lot of people wouldn't. I was going to ask you, do you have any examples of maybe of people who, demonstrate or communicate to the world their brand well, like that, that
Well,
people would know and recognize?
you're so great because you set me up. You know that I have an answer for that. You definitely could have shared that. Yeah, I mean, and just to circle back to your brand, I think anybody who knew me, and it would be fair to say that I know I'm not a health and wellness kind of gal just yet. That's not part of my brand. I'm working on it, but I don't embody that, right? I mean, that's not like part of my essence. So, yeah, people like Oprah Winfrey, and I know not everybody's going to know who that is. But if you think about somebody like LeBron James or help me out, somebody in the health and fitness world. Oh, Lewis Howes is somebody that I follow. He's known for a lot of different things. And something that would be off brand for him would be to talk poorly about anybody, because his whole brand is about uplifting, and it's the school of greatness, and it's about helping other people improve their lives. So it would be really off brand if he were on social media like, look at that. That's a ridiculous, or I want to say hating on people. I don't know if people still say that, but and then I want to get specifically to Tina. We'll talk more about your questions in the next segment, but I'm going to answer it now while you're here now. Aaron, did you want to add any people or examples you can think of as far as brands before we talk about how to manage it and then align it?
No, I was just going to kind of piggyback off what you said, that some of the examples that you gave, like it or, love them or hate them. I do agree that they communicate very well who they are and what they represent very well. So.
And that makes me think a great example of a brand and who embodies it and is very clear about it would be any of the Kardashians, except maybe Rob. I don't know Rob's brand, but that, if I were an employer trying to hire one of the Kardashians, I'd have a hard time knowing if Rob is the right person. I'm so sorry, Rob. Not that you're ever going to see this, but I just don't know enough about him to know if he's the better candidate or not, as much as I do these other. But even then, they have their distinct brands, right? Kendall and Kylie are two very different brands. So the idea would be to be very specific. So I appreciate that. We'll talk about how to manage your brand and how to align it. But I want to get back to, again, the question is, where do I start if I want to make a career change? And let's say I'm in my 50s, right? I get that question all the time. When I started doing this kind of work about 20 years ago, I would get people in their 50s and 60s and say, well, I guess it's kind of too late, right? I'm facing retirement. Who's going to hire me? I disagree with that. Whether we're talking about age or religion or ethnicity or socioeconomic status or where you live, the right employer is going to value you. So long as you identify your brand, manage your brand, and know how to align it, right? If you're willy-nilly just applying for any job, it's going to be hard for them to see your value. But if you're afraid that how am I going to overcome this obstacle of being 50 or 60? I don't see it, or 16. I don't see those as obstacles. I think it's about packaging your brand in the right way for the right employer and then making a match. And the reason I'm so confident in talking about this is because when I was a director of career services, I put a version of this together for my students before they graduated. And the students who engaged in this process before they graduated were employed sometimes before they graduated, or usually within about a month. And I found that the students who didn't engage in each of these steps, it took them sometimes almost a year. And so that's the important part. The next part of that question that Tina and Nathan both asked about, career changing is, when you're describing the job, and again, we'll talk more about this in the job searching section as well as the resume. So if you can't stick with us, watch the recording. But once you're clear about your brand, you'll know which jobs to apply for and which ones not to apply for. And you'll know how to market yourself on your resume and cover letter, right? I would say the job description that you're applying for, so long as you've picked one that you qualify for, you use that new job description to help you describe your skills and relate them to the employer, the new employer. So for example, let's say Aaron has a job in a call center. I actually worked for Gracias por llamar AT&T. That means thank you for calling AT&T. Don't make fun of my Spanish, please. But that's kind of all I know how to say in Spanish. I worked there for a few years, and I worked at Chase Bank for a few years when I was in college, and I liked it, but at some point I wanted to move on. That's fair. Let's say Aaron was going to go from a call center to health and wellness. And Aaron's thinking, well, those are not really related. How do I make that connection? If you read some of the job descriptions, which again, next hour, we'll talk about setting up alerts and how to use those to your benefit. Like, what is an alert? How do you use it? Aaron gets to see the language that those new employers want for those new jobs. So if he's going to be working in health and wellness, they're going to want a lot of customer or client attention. They're going to want holistic care. They're probably going to say something about a fast-paced environment, attention to detail. What Aaron will want to do and what you would want to do is use language, take everything from your existing job. I'm trying to put my hand in the camera. Take everything from your existing job that relates, pull it out, meaning hang on to it, keep it on your resume, pull out anything that doesn't add value to the new employer, and then build in the key terms that are in the job posting and use those as well. So it'll be a balance between the skills that carry over that you've already done in the old job, and then a reference to anything that you could have done in the new, if that makes sense. Again, we'll talk about it more in the job searching and resume sections. But I will say this, regardless of your age, if you've done something for a long time, like if I worked in 20 years higher ed, if I all of a sudden want to go and be a health and wellness administrator or some high level, I'm not probably going to be able to go right to the very top. Typically, you do have to at least make a lateral move and then work your way up. I have found that when people are willing to make that lateral move initially, all of their wealth of experience will help them move up very quickly, because it's so hard for employers to find great employees. They can find warm bodies, but it's very difficult to find quality employees. So if you are somebody who stands out as that, even if you start lateral, you'll move quickly. Aaron, do you want to add to that?
I was just looking at some of the comments, and it seems like there's a theme in a couple of the comments and questions. So I want to address that. For example, I'm a healthcare administrator for a private group practice. I know that clinical providers are burnt out, which it sounds like someone else had talked about. They want something not as like tumultuous or, so that seems to be a common theme. So I also have 1 foot out of this industry. I don't see a lot of discussions about this area. What would, in your opinion, be a good career change for healthcare administrators? Well, I guess for me personally, I don't 100% know that, but what I would say is you're kind of on the right track already, because it seems like you're already realizing that I'm approaching burnout. So that's, you want to be aware of that. A lot of people push through that, and some people will try, but I personally don't know how healthy that is. So I think, Linda, you're on the right track to recognize that. But going back to, what Carol had mentioned earlier, outside of a healthcare administrator, start identifying who you are, what your strengths are, in your outside of work, what do people recognize you for, and how? And yet I don't want to get ahead, and I know Carol's going to talk about this, but that might help you decide where to kind of start tailoring your search, or who you want to align with But
Mm-hmm.
it's a common theme. It seems like a lot of people are approaching burnout. So how would you, I mean, what would you say to that, Carol?
Yeah, well, thanks. I mean, you said a lot of the things I would say, Linda. That's super common. I talk to people who want help making career transition all the time, who are transitioning out of healthcare. But it's the same is also true for people like I think Nathan and some other folks were saying counseling, which is healthcare as well. But now is a time for people, that they're having, it's not just you, it is industry wide, is what I'm trying to say. I think, as Aaron said, I don't know if you were here with us when we talked about what it means to change your channel, Linda, but that's what you're doing right now. We don't have to settle for whatever it is that's happening right now that doesn't serve us. We can make a change. And so that's where change your channel comes in, which would be to change your thoughts. That's what you're doing. You're aware that this is not working out. You're probably feeling a disconnect, and then you're ready to take some action. So you are in the ideal space. In terms of what's next or what is healthcare adjacent, I was talking about this just a few minutes ago, but I'll circle back because I don't know who's here at the time. What you want to do if you're thinking about a career change is, as you think about your brand, you've decided kind of who you are. I would also then write down all of your best skills and strengths. Are they technical? Are they administrative? Are they leadership? Are they computer? What are those categories, if you will? And then write down as many as you can. Oftentimes that will help you. When you write it down, you'll probably come up with something that jumps out at you. But because it's healthcare administration, then I would say anything administratively should be a relatively easy jump for you, if you will. Meaning, there are lots of jobs that will, ask for business classes. But you don't necessarily have to have been in a business program to have taken things like financial analysis or auditing or management or even marketing, things like that. There are related programs that have those as well. I think there are some free assessments you can do. I'm completely drawn. Oh, Career Coach is one of them. You can do some free personal assessments. Yes, they'll want your email. And keep in mind, they're not always super thorough. In terms of one time I did an assessment, I won't name the site, but it said maybe I should work in garbage sanitation or be a hairdresser. I am not strong enough or diligent enough to wake up early enough to be in sanitation, nor do I have skill sets to be in hair. So grain of salt with that, but at least gets you in thinking about what's possible. The other side of that, I have to say, Linda, is why I do coaching, because it does take sometimes a conversation. And I know Aaron and I did this a lot as advisors. Sometimes I like to talk to students or anybody changing careers about what's possible. What I would encourage you not to do is think about limiting yourself. So many people think, I have a business degree, what's a business job? Or I have a literature degree, what are my literature jobs? Scratch that. Instead, think about everything you like to do. Typically what I tell, and this is for Tina too, if she's still with us, if you could do anything all day that's both appropriate and legal, just set that out, right away. What would it be? And really think about it. Would it be singing, dancing, drawing? Sometimes people will say, well, I watch a lot of TV. And I say, well, great. What are you watching on TV? Well, I watch a lot of crime scenes investigation. And I say, why? Oh, because I built it. And then they talk about how passionate they are about it. I go, hello, do you know that you could switch gears and go into something criminal justice related? Some of those job postings don't say you have to have a degree in criminal justice. Some of them don't require a degree. So I would say, Linda, an idea would be, again, start with your brand, focus on your strengths and skills, make a list of them, and then really think outside the box to what do you want to do? That's the idea. And then if you can work with somebody outside of doing a free career coach, that's a great idea. Aaron, did you want to chime in with Janelle's comment?
Yes. So thank you, Janelle. So Janelle commented for healthcare workers, there are branch healthcare industries, for example, life care facilities, retirement, strong future growth in the state of AZ. So, just as an example of something to consider, um, I was going to ask you, Carol, what are your thoughts on? You really talk about, bring up some good points, and I like the example of anything administrative. So, um, would you say that sometimes if you could get into something, let's say administrative, that aligns and is still working out, maybe it's not everything you're looking for in a position, but perhaps like the work hours, or it's not so stressful that it affords a lifestyle outside of
Yes.
work that you
Yep.
could, that you're also feeling rewarded because you have time to do the things you love. For me, like hiking, walking, running, things like that. I mean, how would you, is that something to consider in your opinion?
Yeah, and I appreciate that's something we'll talk more about in the next hour, but I appreciate that you brought that in now because again, really the part people skip over is the self-exploration. If you really spend a little bit of time, and Aaron has said, I know my skills, I know who I am, I also know what's important to me. And as Tina said, I'd like to have something a little less stressful. Tina's not in healthcare, but a lot of healthcare folks are feeling stressed. If I could just find an environment that is closer to home, allows for remote work, pays me what I'm worth, you really can. It's kind of like dating, right? Pick your must haves and then pick your would be nice to be, but absolutely do not settle. Especially at this moment in time, there's no reason to settle. So, yeah, it's really thinking through what is important to me. Does it have to be this kind of title or this kind of level? Frankly, there are times in my life when I've been an associate dean or something of that level. And then my next job was like, boop, I'm going to go back to academic advising because it is easier on my spirit and my soul. I like being with the students, and I find that when I'm in administrative roles that high, I'm removed from them and I'm less happy. So, yeah, it's less prestigious, and yes, I make less money, but for my big picture, the value, and I'm always really big on knowing the value, that's what I want to do. If I choose a job that costs me emotionally, then the cost is greater than the value, and I don't want that. So, yeah, it's got to be all of those things. And Lisette, I just want to circle back to let you know, we did see your comment. It might be that you need to refresh the LinkedIn because I can see it on a separate LinkedIn account here. And we have some folks from LinkedIn joining us. But nonetheless, I'm glad that you're with us. I think that we've addressed each of the questions, but for anybody who's with us that's already asked, if we haven't fully addressed your question, please come back and ask. Go ahead and chat now. I want to talk a little bit about how to manage your brand and align your brand. But while you're with us, I want to address your questions. And then, of course, at 10, we'll focus more on job searching strategies. You're welcome, Lisette. So we've talked about understanding your brand and really doing that exploration, but then also managing it. And I'm a big proponent of the thought that if you don't manage it, it's going to manage you. Managing your brand is partly social media, but it's partly everything else. So whether you are, I used to talk about this a lot with students, so it does apply to any student, but it obviously doesn't just apply to students. For example, if you're a student watching, if you are looking for a letter of recommendation from an instructor, or you generally want to be seen as a professional, if that's what you've identified as you want to be part of your brand, then you must start acting as if you already are, which means getting to class on time without anybody else prompting you, taking notes without anybody else prompting you, asking questions, getting the most out of your education, not because it's your favorite class, but because the habits you make in college go with you beyond college. But even if you're not in college, if you're somebody who's kind of fallen into that trap, and I think most of us have, where it's everything you can do to get out of bed and get to work, change your channel. Changing your channel and starting to do the things that are true to your brand, even if you don't love the job, will help you in your transition. Should make the transition easier because you can go, okay, yeah, normally I drag myself out of bed because I hate this. as soon as you know you're on the path to change your channel and change your career, you can say, yes, I'm not excited about this particular job or industry anymore, but I'm headed for something else. So you start being more positive and you start being more professional, and then you start bringing that energy back to you. It's kind of like dating also. When you are down in the dumps, feeling low, and you're like, hey, does anybody want to date? People pick up on that and they're like, no, I don't. You know what I mean? But if you're upbeat and energetic and positive, people are like, oh, well, who are you? What's happening? So no worries, Linda. Thank you so much. We can send you the recording if you've registered, so no worries. Managing your brand would be, again, starting to do the things that support what you've said you want your brand to be. So you're dressing in a certain way, you're behaving in a certain way, you're talking in a certain way, and then you're managing the social media version of you and making sure it supports your brand as well. I have some examples, but I wanted to pop over to Aaron to see if you had anything to add about managing your brand.
I really like your example of, like kind of behaving as if now. And I think that's a perfect example of, like showing up on time, or, if your brand is professional, or you say it is, but, you're always late, or, then there's something that's off. So you have to start behaving as if. And I think sometimes the behavior kind of it puts things in motion, and you're able to, start carrying yourself as if, and then people see that. So I think it's a little bit more than just doing something to get noticed. Like, this is something that you should be doing more for you than to get noticed. Am I
100%?
Okay.
100%. It should be about you living your most authentic self for yourself, and then that shining through to the people around you. It isn't always easy. And I just want to take a short second to kind of pop away from career, though, to give you a visual. If you're with us and you have a second, you can Google, there's a vibrational chart that you can look at. It's an energy chart. And for me, I envision this all day long, every day. Meaning when you're at a low vibration for energy, like you are sad or helpless or depressed or anxious, it goes then up to mad and content, boop, 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 all the way up to happiness, joy, peace, and love. If you're in one of those lower vibrations, don't expect or assume that you can go from there to boop, I'm happy and joyful, full of love. Sometimes you can, but most of the time you can't. You've got to work your way up. But for me, it's helpful, especially if I'm trying to change jobs or dating, to figure out where I am and then just at least try to inch my way up by doing some things that changing my thoughts, changing my feelings, taking some action. But yeah, it's for you. It's never about the other person or the employer. And in doing that, you attract then the employer who goes, oh, wow, you have fantastic energy. I think this would be a really good match. And then did I answer your question, Aaron?
Yeah, you did. There is something that came through in the comments, and just, I don't know if other people can see others' comments, so I'll try to kind of read them out loud, or if there's something that's a main point, I'll try to address them. But if you don't mind, I'd like to bring up Nathan had a question. So how important is the social media prize for those of us who wouldn't typically include social media utilizer as part of their brand? For example, I think I've posted, I'm not sure if that's a type of, I posted, do you know what that means? I'm not a big social on Facebook, maybe twice in 5+ years, or is that?
I'm not sure. Oh, okay. Oh, so this is a question I get quite a bit, actually. People will say, I don't have social media. Should I create it so that I'm more relevant in the job search? And by the way, hi, James. Welcome. Acting as if does help a lot of people. I don't think it, so. The answer to that question for Nathan is it depends on the industry you want to go into. Based on what Nathan has shared of the more professional perspective, I would not go out of your way to set up an Insta, I think that's what the kids call it, or Facebook or anything like that. I would focus on LinkedIn For most people, LinkedIn is the way to go. There are very few industries like graphic design. I don't see a lot of folks. I mean, there's a community on LinkedIn for sure, but there are other platforms is what I'm suggesting. Most everybody can benefit from LinkedIn, but I would not go out of your way to create the other social medias. What I would say though, is just ensure if you are on social media that everything aligns with your brand. So again, anything that's off brand for you, delete it and manage your contacts. I've had to hide a few of my contacts because they don't represent my brand. It's not that I don't love those people. It's just that I'm trying to create something that's consistent to me, and the outside influences aren't always. So it's for me to manage them. The other question I get, number 2, I would want to say about that is if you're going into any city, state, or government job, county, any of those, be prepared for a full-on social media search. And for other employers outside of those, be prepared for them to say in an interview, "We love you, Aaron. You're the top candidate. Do me a favor, go ahead and log into your social medias." Be prepared. You certainly have the option to say no, thank you. And they certainly have the option to say, well, then goodbye. Because everything you're doing, they could see as representing their brand. And that's that last part of the brand when we were talking about managing your brand and then aligning it. That's the last piece, is making sure your brand aligns with that dream employer's brand or a couple of employers. If Aaron is, I'm just going to use you for all my examples. If Aaron's proposing that he's a health and wellness professional, but his Instagram or I don't know, TikToks are all about him doing something less than professional, he's just sending conflicting messages. And for those of you in college, I've seen lots of students, it's not funny. It's not funny, but it's interesting that we're talking about it. But I have seen students over the years who, after getting financial aid money, they will post pictures of them in Vegas and say something about, hey, just got my financial aid. That's not the best idea because that's not what the money is for. And I don't know who checks that or how that could work out. But the point is you're sending conflicting messages. So I would just manage all of that so that it's all reflective of what it is you want to be seen as. So again, there's the in-person, your verbal and your nonverbal communication and everything there. And then there's also the online or social media. I definitely would. Yeah. And Tina says, watch out. This is low vibration. Yeah. Things even like gossiping or hating on people. If Tina, I'm just going to call you out because there's an episode of myself and Tina on my website, which is changeyourchannel.live. Check out Tina's episode. Tina's very much, she posts a lot about the Lord and religion and how important it is to her. So for her to be on one of the social media sites gossiping would just seem counter to her brand. I would think, well, how would you say this? And then you're doing that, right? So yeah, watch Tina's episode. Nathan, did that answer you for helping or for answering your question? I guess one other thing, I'm answering my own question, is I would highly recommend, I normally do sessions on how to network effectively, which I call connect working. I'm gonna coin that, or I don't know, whatever you call it. Own it or something. I don't know. Anyway, trademark it. I would connect, not network. I usually do a session on that and then a session on how to use how to use LinkedIn for networking purposes. I don't have time for those topics today, but I will post more on YouTube and then on my website as well. I would highly recommend using LinkedIn and all of its features if you're thinking of a job change, because that 80 to 85%, maybe even more, of how you're going to get the new job is based on your network. And it's already built in for you through LinkedIn. So I would highly recommend it in your job search. And again, we're still talking about managing your brand. And then I also want to touch on aligning your brand. Aaron, did you have any questions?
No, it sounds like, I'm just thinking of, all good points, but being the best version of yourself, I mean, really inspires others and speaks to the world. But I realize that it's not always easy to get there. And hopefully, start this conversation today talking about some of this certainly helps. I also just wanted to comment that, in my opinion, people, we take jobs, because maybe we thought we liked it, or maybe we took a job that's work, but really it never aligned with us. So I think sometimes really starting the conversation and trying to figure out who we are, it's not always easy, because we've jumped into these positions that maybe afforded us a lifestyle we thought we liked and needed and wanted. So I don't want to sit here and I want to acknowledge that it's not an easy thing to do, but hopefully this is a good starting point for you all.
I agree, Aaron. This is not easy. And when I talk about people changing their channel, I know it's not easy, but it can be done, and it's worth doing. Because if what you're after is quality of life and creating some kind of experience in life where you get to leave work, and at the end of the day, you feel more energized instead of less energized and drained, that's a huge win. It impacts the whole rest of your life. If you can come home to your family and you're a happier person, you're not beaten down and just want to go to bed and you can't talk to anybody and life is horrible, then you have found a great job, because the work that we do is just part of our life. It's not supposed to be the all-consuming life determinant, if you will, right? So that's why the discussion of changing your channel fits into your career change, because it starts with self-exploration, which is very difficult, but worth it. In terms of aligning your brand, and then Aaron, I'll ask if you'll share Lisette's question. And by the way, Meredith, I saw your post too. I'm on the LinkedIn page. When I look over here, it's what I'm doing. I'm actually on somebody else's login for a few reasons, but I can definitely see you over here. So thank you for that. In terms of aligning your brand, again, once you know what your brand is, you've managed your brand. If you've done yourself a favor in doing that work first, you save yourself a ton of time in the next step, which is job searching. Because to align your brand means I have thought through who I am, what's important to me, what I want, and I have found jobs that match that. The example I typically give to folks would be, again, two of the very different companies. Boeing is much more corporate-y, much more professional from what I would guess. And then there's somebody like Google, a company like Google, which is like nap pods and creativity and cereal bar, right? Neither brand is better. Everybody's brand is great just the way it is. It's perfect. You don't have to be anybody else. You don't have to try to be somebody else. Just figure out who you are and be the best version of yourself, right? That's the takeaway there. Then find a company who values that. If you start looking for companies that don't value that, you will waste your time job searching, and it will not be a fulfilling process. Because if Aaron and I are more on the professional side and less on the creative, artsy side, if you will, us trying to apply for Google, I mean, it's possible we can make some connections, but at the end of the day, would we even be happy in that environment? I don't know. If Google says, hey, listen, we have a nap pod and all the cereal you can eat, why don't you just stay here tonight, work at 3 a.m? I don't think I'm up for that anymore. Whereas somebody else, if that's their brand and they're like, yeah, I want to work when I feel creative, perfect. So that's what I mean by aligning, is just making sure they match. And so many times, a quick caveat to that is when I talk about the way you dress and the way people perceive you, the question I usually get is, well, I have a lot of tattoos or piercings. Should I hide those? Should I change my hair? My hair is very colorful. And this kind of touches on Lisette's question, which we'll get to in a second. But I would say, be your authentic self and find an employer who values that. If you are in this creative space, colorful hair, lots of tattoos, lots of piercings, and you are somebody who wants to work at like a bank, consider that some changes might have to be made on your part so that your brands align, because the company is going to want somebody who's at least similar. Now, this is not every bank. Some banks, give and take a little bit. But just do yourself a favor and find something that matches. If you want to go into styling hair, wear whatever you want. I mean, for the most part, right? Just matching it, because then you'll do yourself a favor.
I think that kind of touches on Lizette's question, which I'll go ahead and address it now. My faith is important to me. I try not to post religious posts. In my profile, you will see that I volunteer and have worked with Christian ministries. Should I avoid posting religious things? My simple answer, and then I'll let you discuss this. I feel like if that's your true authentic self, there's people and there's companies, if you're coming at it from an angle of employment, that value that. So you probably wouldn't want to be in an environment that doesn't appreciate that, if that's who you truly are. That is my answer. But Carol, how do you feel about that? And
100% agree. And I'm thinking of a student I worked with in the past, and a couple of people since, but the first time I had this conversation was with someone named Brandon, probably 7 years ago. And I noticed his resume was like half. And he was in his, I don't know, sorry, Brandon, if I'm getting this wrong, but I was guessing he was in his 30s. He worked really hard. And he was a member of the probably is member of the Mormon church. And I said, well, where's everything else? I'm sure you had a mission trip. Where's all of that? He said, well, I left it off because I'm guessing an employer would not want to see that. And I said, but isn't that who you are? Like at your core, that's really important to you? He said, well, yeah. And I said, then why would you want to work for an employer who doesn't value that? You know, it's possible if you add something about your age, right? If they could figure out how old you are, people are always worried about that, or your religion or your ethnicity. And an employer can figure it out and doesn't want to interview you or hire you. Forget if it's illegal, right? Let's just say you can't prove it. You have dodged a bullet by not even going there, because that's not going to be helpful. Lisette, I would say the same thing Aaron did, which is embrace who you are and find a culture that celebrates your passion. They may not have any religious affiliations, but they get a sense of who you are. And your posts are I imagine, going to be, well, I guess it depends on what you're posting. If you're posting things about positivity and support and love and hard work and faith and trust, versus these bad things are going to happen, bad people do this, and you're going to be condemned for that, what brand are you presenting? So it's not so much that it's religious. It's, I would say, more about, does it align with your brand? If you want to be seen as a positive person, then post positive things. And as Tina says, put God first and the rest will follow. Amen, girl. Because I know Tina says the same thing, right? Religion is very important. This doesn't mean that you don't have to. But when we start talking about, it doesn't mean you, sorry guys, I get to talking fast and then I blah, blah. You don't have to put faith-based work on your resume, and you don't have to promote it on social media. But if it's part of who you are and your brand, I would say, why not? I would say, why just be your authentic self and accept that, and let the right employer value that. So yeah, that's exactly what I would say.
Another, thank you for addressing that, Carol. Another question coming through. How should one go about changing their brand? For example, something was true, but now it isn't.
Yes. And this is from Meredith, because I can see over here on this other tab. So thanks, Meredith. That's the beauty of all of this. I don't know if you were with us at the beginning, but let me come back here. Boop, just kidding. That's the beauty of changing your channel. It can happen all the time. So once you figure out, okay, this is your brand may have been this other stuff. And I'm glad you brought this up, because so many times I've talked with students and people in the past who've said, I've lost my kids because of drugs, or I've been to jail, or, I've done all these things. Why in the world would anybody hire me? Or do you know what I mean? I've accepted this other sense of my reality. Where do I go from here? And I've said the same thing I'm saying now is just start over. Decide who you are and who you're not, and then start acting as if you're that person you want to be. Meaning, if you want, we talked about this a little bit ago when we first started the call. If you want to be seen as, let's say, professional, then make sure you're doing things that would have you look to be a professional, on time, well prepared. You've thought things through. Your language is professional. Your dress is professional. That all those things, what you're communicating verbally and non-verbally, support what you say you are. Just start changing your actions, because when you change your thoughts and you start, I'm really big on manifesting too, which to manifest means to bring about what you want to see in life. You've got to change all three of these. You have to change your thoughts, which is, I deserve this better thing. I'm capable of this better thing. And then you want to try to feel how it feels to have those things or be in those moments. I would feel excited. I would be very happy. I would feel very proud. I would feel love, peace, joy, those higher level vibrations, and then take some action toward it. So I'm going to start, like, if I want my personal brand to be seen as a health and wellness person, I need to start being healthier and more well. Otherwise, if I don't take action, I'm just having great thoughts. But I would say start with, even if it sounds overwhelming, which it is for a lot of people, I would say start with one thing at a time. What's one thing you can do today and create a new habit for that supports this brand that's authentic for you? We can take one other question. And Aaron, is there anything you want to add before we move on to the next block of time?
I hope I'm not. It is my opinion that there are probably some things that are constant that probably would never change that we have about us. But I certainly think of the things that can change. I think you nailed it on how to approach that. But I believe that there are just some things that make us who we are. And we've always been like that, and allowing that and giving that room for those things to shine through is also very important.
Can you think of an example?
Well, for example, like if people were always naturally caring, and they'll always be like that, and nothing that people can do or tell them is going to change that.
Yeah.
I think there's ways to embrace those things. So that would be an example. So
Yeah.
I think there's some things that are worth changing, like actions, but I also just think there's some like innate things we were born with that are always going to be there. You just have to give them room to shine through.
Well, and I'm glad you said that. Yeah, I think those are more like core values, if you will, or characteristics. But at the same time, if you're somebody who's watching, whether you're with us live or it's a recording, and you've been led to believe there's something core and innate about you that's not great, that's not true. It's not true. And you don't have to accept it. If your beliefs are not serving you, you don't have to believe them. I read something or saw something the other day. Don't believe everything you think, because that's not true. And it's probably been holding you back. I have told lots of people over the years, career change is usually not easy, and sometimes it's not fun. But if you approach it like, if somebody said, hey, you're 9 years old and you can spend a whole day at Disneyland doing whatever you want, you just have to plan it out, you'd probably be very excited about the planning, because you get to then have this great experience. Think about the job searching as something you get to do. You get to create this new version of life for yourself, as opposed to have to, because it's well worth creating something great than sticking with anything that doesn't add value to your life. Even though it's a job, it's not supposed to cost you to go to it emotionally or spiritually. So thank you so much for that, Tina. Are there any other questions that you guys might have about personal branding, how to identify it, how to manage it or align it or even change it? I'm not sure if, Meredith, if you're still with us, if we answered your question before we move on. Okay. Aaron, did you want to add anything before we move on?
No.
Okay.
Great questions. Thank you for all the people, asking and engaging with us. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that too. Okay, so we will move on to job searching. Again, if you're just tuning in, I'm going to not everybody is with us for the whole time. So some of these slides are a little bit repeat. Obviously, if you're watching the recording, you can fast forward through some of these slides or some of this time. But I'm one of your hosts, Carol Redden. I'm the owner of Change Your Channel. And I have worked with people to make career changes and change personally and professionally for about 20 years now. In higher education and also in coaching practice. And this event really came about today because I had been getting a lot of comments and questions about what do I do, either for themselves or a college child who's at home, or in some cases a parent or a neighbor. And so this is really put together to help folks know there are other options out there. And they're not just options. If you put thought into this process, they're really good options. If you are just joining or tuning in now, which I don't know if we have any new folks, I would recommend go back and watch the first hour, because there's a reason that was put first. It is the first part of the process. You'll see Tony Coates. He's actually joining us at 11 when we start talking about resumes. But I also want to give, and I should say my degrees are in communication. Keep forgetting to share that. Maybe nobody cares. Aaron, do you want to take just a minute to introduce yourself, and then we'll get right into the content?
Yes, thanks for having me today, Carol. My name is Aaron Torres. I do have a bachelor's degree in kinesiology and a master's in educational leadership. I've spent the last 15 years working in higher education, coaching people and through their own professional development, helping them reach their educational and career goals. Before that, I was working as a trainer, a strength and conditioning coach. So I kind of like to bring that all together and, to help people and to continue coaching them. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here. For those who are just tuning in, Aaron and I worked together for a few years giving seminars similar to this. And the students who and community members who participated just said that they found it very helpful. And again, for those just tuning in, I worked for a few years as a director of career services and met with hundreds of different employers, HR recruiters, managers, hiring managers. And I learned what they want to see from candidates, what they were not seeing from candidates, what's most important, what changes need to happen, things like that. And so that is sort of where we're coming from today. But then added to that, I'm bringing in what I would call changing your channel, because in my mind, you are doing yourself a disservice if you don't change your channel before you start your career change. So the channel is just the way we exchange energy with people in the world around us, and even within ourselves. So it's kind of like The Secret, where whatever energy you put out, you get back. But I add to that and make it a little more clear, which is to say, when you change your thoughts, feelings, and actions, you get to change the way you experience the world. It doesn't have to be that you change all three of them at the same time. But I will say, little by little, when you can change all three, for example, when you're making a career change, we had somebody on earlier who said, I'm thinking about making this career change. Something doesn't feel right to me. I'm feeling disconnected, or I'm feeling unhappy about this. And now I'm ready to take action. That person is very well positioned to find a better career because she's done each of these things and is willing to keep doing them. If she were just feeling unhappy and not really changing her thoughts or taking action, she would just continue to feel unhappy. So changing your channel relates to something you can do every day, all day, if you want, in any situation, to improve the way you experience the world around you. But we're applying it today to, of course, the career change process. We just talked about personal branding. And of course, this hour, we're going to talk about job searching strategies. And again, the reason that the topics are in this order is because you really do want to start with who you are, what's important to you, what's your brand, how do you manage it, and how do you align it with either an employer or your own company, so that when you get ready to start searching for jobs, you don't waste any of your own time. I've looked for jobs in the past, and I can tell you it's disheartening and it's time consuming when it feels like you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall, is I think what I said earlier. So this hour is dedicated to what are some strategies you can apply to make it more intentional, more purposeful, in terms of getting better jobs that are more aligned with your goals and hopefully pay you what you're worth. So I think what a lot of people do is they just start applying. And I don't know about you, Aaron, but I know you've been on hiring committees before. I have talked with employers, and as an employer myself, in years past, I have seen up to 100 candidates apply for a job. 100 resumes or applications come through, and so many of them should never have come through. They were generic, or they were completely not qualified. They didn't appear to even want the job. So think about this from this perspective, and I'll get your input, Aaron, over the next hour. Is anytime you are job searching, yes, you want to be fully aware of what you want and what's important to you, but you want to look at the process from the eyes of an employer that you have decided is a good match for you. What is that person or company looking for? What do they or he or she value? And then act accordingly. So we'll come back to this slide, but Aaron, have you seen also lots of candidates that probably should never have applied for jobs in the past?
100%, yes. But I couldn't also help to think about my own experience with that is whenever, when I graduated college, full admission, I wasn't doing any of this. I thought just by having a college degree, I can go and apply wherever I want. And so I remember the interviews that I did get. I mean, obviously I wasn't getting the positions, but it all makes sense. Like they didn't believe me. I was never a good match to begin with. So no matter how good I answered or how, they, in their eyes, it was probably just someone who's just it wasn't a good match. He's just, you know what I mean? They didn't really believe me. I didn't do the legwork. So I think initially I couldn't help thinking about my own experience with that.
Well, as always, I appreciate your honesty. I think most of us, especially as college students, don't even know what we don't know. But I've met with lots of people who are not college students, or in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they haven't spent any time thinking about their personal brand or if it aligns with an employer or what they want from an employer either. So, I mean, it's, I think, pretty common, which is why, something like this is, I'm hoping, helpful for people. So again, if you're just tuning in, we talked about in the last segment, your personal brand. If you missed that, I would recommend going back and watching that, because one of the big takeaways from there is once you identify the brand you want to be seen as, or what, let's say your brand is maybe more of a professional, you want to start acting as if. So you definitely want to be doing whatever those things are that help make you professional before you apply. The next biggest thing you want to be doing before you apply is do your research on the companies. And research them, again, in a way, this is not meant to be an extra step. It's meant to save you work. Because, for example, if Aaron is at company XYZ and I research them and there's something on their website about being against this thing that I believe in strongly, I don't need to go anywhere near that company. But I would never know that if I didn't do research. Right. On the other hand, if I'm reading about Aaron's company and they talk about all these things that are important to me, like volunteer work and how they invest in their employees and how they want a work-life balance, or they let people work from home, or whatever those things are that are important to me, that I figured out are important to me, then I go, ooh, now I know I like the company. Let me research the job. If the job aligns with my goals in terms of, yes, it's doable. Yes, I have these skills. Oh, wow, they want me to work this shift and they want me to have this kind of responsibility for that kind of pay. Ooh, no, out. In the same way, employers are going to screen out candidates. You will want to be screening out employers who are not a good fit for you. But it does take a little bit of work on the front end. And just a quick side note, because we don't have time to talk about how to use LinkedIn or Indeed. Well, I will say, during your search, you should set up job alerts. But in LinkedIn, you can also join lots of groups and just follow the conversations happening in those groups. And those conversations should lead you to some job language for the jobs, and also possibly some employers who are sort of top of the line employers in that field, especially if you're changing fields. That might be helpful.
Couple questions coming through.
Okay.
So Tina asks, what about how it used to be apply even if you don't meet the qualifications just to try to get your foot in the door? Is that way old thinking? And really quick, just to address it, I think to Carol's point earlier, if it's not something that aligns, or if you don't feel like, if you're applying, just apply, and it's not a good match, then I would say yes. But would you like to add to that, Carol?
You would say yes, apply anyway?
No, I would say yes, that is absolutely don't apply anyway. That is, in your words, old thinking, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it this way. It depends on, there are very few instances when I would say apply anyway if you're not qualified, because like, out of 100 resumes I would get, maybe 12 are qualified. In my mind, actually, there was at least one time when I was posting for a job and I kept seeing the person every couple days resubmit, and the person wasn't qualified. So in my mind, that person stood out in all the wrong ways. It said to me, you've not even read the job description, which tells me, and it may or may not be true, either you don't know what's important to me, you don't understand the job description, you don't understand that you're not qualified. It doesn't communicate anything great if you're not qualified and you apply anyway. That being said, in the next hour, we talk about resumes and cover letters, and I have a sample cover letter. I have 2 samples, one of which I'll share today. Ideally, you would have most of the qualifications. The reason, and those would be on your cover letter as well as your resume. The only reason I say there's a caveat, or in most situations, is because right now employers are desperate. So it is possible that maybe you don't have, let's say, 95% of the qualifications, but you have 90. And then you have some other things that they didn't put on the job description, but would be helpful. Then I would say, yeah, maybe it's worth. But if you're talking like you have 50% of what's required, I don't think it's a good look. I think it leaves them with a bad first impression. Again, that's assuming that your first contact with that person or company or job has to be your resume. There might be other ways to network. So for example, Tina, somebody I know, if you were looking for jobs, let's say on LinkedIn, and I knew somebody who was recruiting for that job, why not just reach out to me and say, hey, Carol, I found that this thing looks really great. Can you introduce me to that person? I would say, yeah, of course, because I know your brand well enough to feel like I would be willing to do that for you. But in a pinch, when your best ways to apply in writing only, meaning your resume or application, I'd only apply for the things that you're at least 90 to 95% qualified for, and then make a strong argument for other things you have to offer, if that makes sense.
Carol, is it
yeah,
possible?
Tina, I don't think that shows dedication. Tina said, doesn't that show dedication, that you really want the job? And it's like that old commercial. I don't know, Erin, if you're even old enough to remember this, but for Mervyn's, when there's a lady outside and she's on the glass, she's like, open, open, open. That doesn't help the door open any sooner. And if you're talking about employers, yeah, I know you said that jokingly, but no, I don't know that they necessarily favor unqualified candidates. So just FYI. Oh, my cat's here. It's just passing through. Sorry about that.
Is it possible, Carol, that sometimes when we talk about not being qualified, like I would say truly give that some real thought, and if after you've really put everything together and you realize 100% like you're not, then you probably shouldn't. But is it possible that sometimes people think they're not qualified, but they really are, because they're not really fully thinking about how what they've done pertains to, like they haven't tapped into, or they haven't. Is it possible that sometimes it's overlooked and we think we're not qualified when perhaps we actually might be, based on what we've done? And
yes, and that's why the personal branding self-exploration step is so important to do first, because you really want to be mindful of what are your strengths, skills, assets, strong characteristics, so on and so forth. So many times I talk to people, military and athletes are great examples, and you could probably relate to this, Aaron. I'll look at their resumes and I'll say, well, where have you been for 7 years? Or why is there a gap here? What's going on? And I'll say, oh, I was just in the military, so I left that off. I'm like, what do you mean you left that off? There's so many transferable skills. And they'll say, no, I didn't do anything great. I just did this thing. And then I rattle off, okay, but every employer wants those things. Maybe not with a gun in your hand, but maybe, all the other things that come with it. So yeah, there are lots and lots of instances where people discount themselves either because of a belief that something is not valuable or they're not valuable. But yeah, that's why I say start with understanding your brand and your strengths before you job search so that you can play the memory game and start matching. But yeah, be honest with yourself. If you don't match, you don't match for sure.
Couple others coming through, and I know I see, Lizette. I will be returning to the office after working with children for 10 plus years. My wardrobe is casual. What are the guidelines now for office dress?
Sure. The answer, did you want to answer that?
Go for it, Carol.
Okay. The answer to that is it depends on where you're going to work. So some companies have gotten a little more lax, and lots of companies let people work from home. I would say business casual is pretty standard still. I happen to be wearing a dress. Aaron, I think you're wearing slacks and the collar shirt, but even at the college where Aaron works, a polo would be fine on some days, right? So I think that generally works. But if you were going to go to a bank, definitely business casual. It just depends on the employer or the industry. And if you're more comfortable, there are people who are not comfortable in business casual, either the shoes or the clothes or the conservative makeup or whatever. And to that, I say, no worries. Let's find a different industry then that supports what is authentic for you. That being said, if you're just afraid you're not the type, then try it out. Why not? Right? I mean, if you're thinking of, let's say, working at a bank, go to the bank and see what the people are wearing. I mean, obviously you can't do that with all companies, but I've had people in the past also say, well, I don't think I can pull off, or I don't have money to go buy. Get yourself to Goodwill or Savers or a place like that. Just even if it's just for the interview, match your interview clothes. We'll talk about that more in interviewing, but match your interview clothes with the field or industry as well. But I think it just depends. It's a great question. And by the way, guys, depending on whatever platform you're on, there's a like button. I see an applause button. I see a heart button. So feel free to use any of those as you like. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not really kidding, but it does help us to know what information you like. Sorry, Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, so another question coming through, and I want to be mindful. I want to make sure that you're covering all your content as well, but some really good questions. So I want to make sure we're addressing them at the same time. So,
okay.
Are there any tips you would offer specifically to neurodivergent people? And then presuming the jobs searching skills apply to customer searching skills.
I think that's Meredith. Yeah, Autism Speaks. I see your reference there to Autism Speaks. They have good, if I'm not mistaken, the last time I looked at their website, they actually have good tips there. But can you be more specific in terms of which part of what we said might be different? And by that, I mean, I was at a conference a couple years ago for NACE, which is a National Association for Colleges and Employers. And we were listening to, I don't know if my friend Bruce is on the call, but he works for Travelers Insurance. And he was giving a panel discussion on neurodiverse candidates. And he was suggesting, at least for their insurance company, and he recommends for other institutions, during the job search or application process, that the candidate reach out to HR and ask exactly that question. How might your company support me through this process? Because it's typically asked if you need any accommodations on the application anyway. And I know that there are people who will say, ooh, I kind of don't want to identify myself as somebody who needs an accommodation. And to that, I would say, if you're afraid a company isn't going to hire you because you need an accommodation, you might want to ask if that's the right employer. An accommodation does not give you preferential treatment. An accommodation levels the playing field. And I will tell you, Meredith, so many employers, we could start a whole discussion on this on LinkedIn. So many employers value neurodiverse candidates, but I think it might be helpful to ask for that support up front with regard to asking for what you need, meaning if you need clarification, I don't know that you necessarily need more time for something, but maybe an explanation for something. There's a whole spectrum, right, of what those needs are. But ideally before the search, everybody can do researching within their, and sometimes some of the neurodiverse folks I've worked with are excellent researchers. I think we might have talked about this too, Meredith. Very great at doing the real detailed researching and getting down to and having a great skill set for comparing my skills with what the employer wants to see and then determining if that's a fit or not. During the search, and let me know, Meredith, if you want me to elaborate a little bit more on something specific. During the search, I'm guessing people do this. I know a lot of college students who are maybe watching, maybe high school, don't do this. But I've met so many people over the years outside of college who also never thought to do this. And that is, during the search, keep a log. And that's this little visual that you see here. Write down the date, the company, the job title, outcome, and notes. And then keep track of what you're doing. Because there are times, I've had example after example over the years of an employer who would call a candidate back and say, hey, Aaron, I'm just checking back in. We'd like to offer you the job. And then Aaron would say something like, who is this? Oh, this is Boeing. And then Aaron says, what job did I apply for? It's not a good look. Not a good look. So it would be better if Aaron were to have this handy, especially if you're job searching. It really should be a priority. And if you track this, then you can be clear about what you have done and what you need to do. Keep in mind that applying for jobs on sites like Indeed or even LinkedIn, that's just one way to apply for jobs. You can also set up things called alerts. If you've never set one up, it's very easy to do. There are sites like Indeed.com. And again, even on LinkedIn, you can go and set up job alerts. I highly recommend, as soon as you think you're ready, some folks in our first hour were talking about, I'm just thinking about a career transition now. I'm not sure when I'm ready. Then that's a great time to set up these job alerts so that you can watch for patterns. What companies seem to always be hiring? And is it always for the same position? If so, maybe they're not hanging on to their people. Or if they're growing, you can tell that. You can also tell if there's a language, meaning they want certain skills or education experience. And if you figure out, let's say, Tina, you're looking to make a career change in a few months when this, that, or the other thing changes, and you see that the employer wants this certification or experience, it gives you time to start getting that experience or education before you apply so that you are qualified. But whether you apply, again, from LinkedIn or Indeed or some other site, those are my two go-tos. I would recommend also using your network. And again, I would recommend LinkedIn, but I would also recommend possibly your other social media, depending on how you manage that. And I would recommend friends and family, depending on how they see your brand as well, if that makes sense. So if my friends and family see me as somebody who parties all the time and blah, 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 I don't want to go to them and say, hey, does anybody know where I can get this really professional job? Because they don't see me as somebody who's going to fit for a very professional job. So it's just not in alignment. So Tina, and to answer your question, I don't know that there's a better way, unless let me back up because not everybody can see that. Tina asked, this is why I shouldn't do your job, Aaron, because I don't do it as good as you. Is it better to use a job search app or go directly to an employer site? Generally, there's no difference unless, let's say it's LinkedIn, and for example, I'm connected to the person or people hiring, then maybe it's helpful to talk about connections first before you apply. Aaron, did you want to jump in or add something? And I know Lisette made a comment.
No, I was gonna. So basically, what I was thinking is, good point. But my response was going to be, I mean, use them all. But I mean, I don't know if one's better than the other. But like you bring up a good point.
Use all.
So like use the apps, go directly to the employer's site. I don't know if one is better than the other, but you do bring up a good point. I thought we'll just, use all resources.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would. I don't know that there's one better than the other unless you're already connected to one or the other. But again, job searching you're going to have a better chance of getting most jobs through your network, through people you know who know you, more so than just sending out a resume. That's why your resume has to be super great, because it's like a cold call, right?
Another question came through, but we will have an interviewing session. So Maria asks, what are a few great questions in the interview process for ascertaining the job's environment will fit you when your top priority is work-life balance? I feel like we'll probably touch on that in an upcoming session. But I mean, do you want to touch on that, or Maria,
Sure.
will you be with us for the full time?
That's actually Miss Mariah.
I'm sorry, Mariah.
No, it's okay. I only know that because I know Mariah. P.S. You can check out Mariah on my LinkedIn page. There's Mariah's in the episode of Road Trip Nation. No, excuse me. I was in Mariah's episode of Road Trip Nation. So thanks for joining us, Mariah. Unless, of course, I'm completely mistaken, Mariah, but I'm pretty sure that's you. Yes, we will talk more about questions you can ask, but the bigger overarching issue here, Mariah, is if we talked a few minutes ago about really doing careful research on the company and the job before you apply. Take notes on as much as you can find about the culture of the company before you get to the interview, because what you don't want to do is ask a question that could be answered by looking at their website. So, for example, some companies will say, we promote a work-life balance, or we allow folks to work from home, or we promote volunteer work, that kind of thing. A lot of companies will speak to their culture on their description, either of the website or the job posting, or both. So first, make sure you look at those places, assuming you haven't already. And then when you get to the job, or the interview, I think it's completely fair to say, how would you describe your company culture with regard to, or a belief system with regard to work-life balance? Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like? You're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. So that's if that's in your personal branding and your self-exploration, if you've decided that the culture of the company is important to you, I would be sure to have that as one of the 3 or so questions that you prepare in advance. And feel free, Mariah, to elaborate if I haven't answered that fully. Aaron, do we have other?
Couple, I think we're good. Maybe a couple comments, but.
Okay. I can see a couple actually from LinkedIn. Okay. So Sonia asks about internships. Sonia, that's a great question or topic. All of what we're talking about applies to internships as well, because you want to think of an internship as a job. If done well, sometimes they turn into jobs. So if you missed the first hour where we were talking about personal branding, I would go back and watch that once the recording's available. And for those who haven't yet signed up for the recording. I recommend doing that because the link to sign up is not going to be there indefinitely. But you would go to my website, which is www.changeyourchannel.life. So I would go there and sign up for the website. For the recording, and I'll send that to you. But definitely go through all these steps. There's a site that I used in the past with students, just called internships.com. And it does list them by city. But that doesn't mean that's the only place. If you're in school, I would go to your instructors, especially if they already see your brand, if they know your brand and you have done a good job of being a good student in their eyes, meaning you're professional, you're on time, you do the work, you have quality work, that kind of thing. Ask them for references. And instructors, Erin and I teach also at college. We love to be references for students when we think it's a good fit. If I've had students in the past who barely make it to class, don't do any work, and want me to be a reference, and I'm like, what do you want me to say? Because I don't think you want me to tell the truth. So I generally don't in those cases. But go to internships.com, ask your professors. If you're on LinkedIn, which it looks like you are, do some research and find out if you already know people there. And if not, another strategy I use for during your job search is ask for informational interviews. I don't know if there's anybody here who knows what that is, but now's a great time to ask for them. And well, on the one hand, employers are very busy because a lot of them are understaffed. But on the other hand, they might welcome it because they're understaffed, right? And they might think, oh, this is a great way to get somebody in the door, right? What you would want to do is you would reach out to somebody in the field. Think about your network as, kind of here and then going out. Who do you know on a first name basis? Friends, family, and then neighbors, friends of parents, that kind of thing, who know your brand and can see it matches. And then to your social medias as well. But ask them who they know. And if you absolutely can't find anybody you know, let's say in this company you want to work for, don't be afraid to call. Find somebody on LinkedIn who's a contact, call, identify yourself as a student. Say, I'm looking to get into this field. I see that you are already in this field and it's a very impressive role. I'd love to learn more about the industry and what you do. Would you be available for a 15-minute phone call or coffee or something like that? Whatever you feel comfortable doing. More than likely, the person will say yes. If the person says no, you can say, no problem, I completely understand. Can you refer me to somebody who might be available? Why not ask the question, right? But at least it's worth asking. And then the best thing you want to do, if you've got somebody for 15, 30 minutes, whatever, plan your questions in advance. And your questions should communicate you've already done research. I don't want to take Erin's time and then say, so Erin, tell me about your company. If Erin's very busy, his response is going to be, well, everything's on the website, maybe go there. Unless he's incredibly gracious. And he's like, oh, well, let me just repeat everything that's on our website. A better question would be something like, oh, so Erin, I see that you're new to this role, and I see that the company is really looking at this new technology. Can you talk about your role as it relates to that new technology? And if that's a question you want to know, then that's a great question, right? Just show that they're well-informed, well-thought-out questions. And if the person only gives you 15 minutes, prepare 5 or 6 questions, but no, you might not get to all of them. At the end of the 15 minutes, you're going to want to say something like, well, I appreciate your time. I know that I've taken so much already. Unless, of course, you have more time and you can ask. But just be really mindful. And then just as a quick side note, this is true for interviews as well. Anytime anybody gives you their time, phone, Zoom, whatever, be sure to send, I prefer a handwritten thank you note that expresses your gratitude for their time, effort, energy, because it is a gift, right? So those would be my strategies outside of traditional, what we're talking about for job searching, that also work for internships.
Has it been your experience that if you can get in front of someone and ask like engaging questions, like you talked about, that surprisingly people actually really enjoy talking about and answering those questions?
Yeah. I mean, wouldn't you if somebody's, I mean, have you had an informational interview before? Has anybody asked you for one?
Yeah, I have, and I
What does
enjoyed
it
it.
feel like?
It's a little bit rewarding to talk about
Mhm.
that,
It's a,
especially if they're asking engaging questions. It's like a way to kind of give back almost that feeling. So,
and it's almost flattering, right? Somebody picked me. You might even be like a CEO or something, and I don't know, maybe not, but it's almost like, oh wow, you want to know more about me. People like to talk about themselves, even if it's their position in a company or their role. So, yeah, people are often willing. And to Lizette's question, I would just ask. It cannot hurt to ask, because even if, I in one of the institutions I taught, the students had to do internships. It's like a service learning requirement as far for our class. But I recommend this to people who are not in college as well. They did informational interviews, or the other folks that I talked to. But so many times, and I hate to say this of this field, but there were often education majors who would come back to me after the assignment and go, oh, no, I can't teach. That's not going to work out for me. It's too much. And I would say, then it's a win. Because even if you find out you can't handle the industry, or it's too much for you, or you're not ready for it, or the person says, we don't have any jobs, we're not hiring, then you go, oh, okay, great. I know more than I did before. And if it redirects your path, even better. The other thing I would want to say about informational interviews is you've only asked for an interview. Be very clear that it's not a job interview unless the person you're interviewing decides to make it that. Meaning, if I'm talking to Aaron about, I've asked for 15 minutes of his time, and in good faith, he gives it to me. I'm just learning. If he says, well, why don't you tell me a little bit more about you? And are you looking for something? And he takes it to that place, then feel free to go with it or not. Answer honestly. But I don't think you want to expect that, because that's not what you asked for. You just asked for an informational interview. Yeah.
I think some comments coming through. I think Sonia is clarifying some of our points. I feel like that's what's going on. So thank you, at Sonia. If it was another question or comment and I'm misreading that, please let me know.
I want to go back to Lisette had a comment earlier that I think I missed, and that was about Dress for Success is another organization. Lisette, do they have resources for men too? I can't remember, but it is, at least for women, it's a great resource. I know in Arizona, we also have St. Joseph the Worker, and it used to be open to men within the public. It is located at one of the, or adjacent to one of the homeless shelters in downtown Phoenix. But you could certainly look it up and see if that's something, if we have any gentlemen watching or with us live. We used to have an organization called, speaking of organizations, and this is true for Lisette or anybody else who's thinking of, like, how do I find out about my skills and make a career change and do some of that exploration? There's a company in Arizona called Fresh Start. It's a women's resource center. I want to say a lot of their services are now virtual. So if you're looking to re-career, they have a lot of resources. Also, we'll talk more about this in a little bit. Lisette, I know one of your questions that you proposed earlier, since we have time, was about resume writing. And that's what we're going to get into in a minute. Well, in about 20 minutes. There is a company, organization. It's a nonprofit organization called Vista del Camino. It's in Scottsdale, Arizona, but you don't have to be a Scottsdale resident to use their services. One of our other co-hosts who's going to join us volunteers for them, and he teaches Microsoft Word classes. So it's a great resource for anybody who is overwhelmed with the thought of creating a resume. I have a template that I'm going to show, and so you'll be able to see it in the recording. So you can get an idea of the formatting that I like to use, and we'll talk about the content as well. But for anybody who might be struggling with, well, gee, I don't even know how to zip along and make certain things bold or change margins or use the header function, if that's true, there are often nonprofit groups in every city who have these free Microsoft Word classes. And maybe just Google that, free Microsoft Word classes in Tennessee or, whatever. And I'm thinking you'll probably find some. Okay.
I have one, another question coming through, and so let me rephrase my question about, I think it's more of an entrepreneur type question, but for people who are looking to be entrepreneurs, their next job, what job searching skills, if any, are applicable to finding customers? I would just say, I'm not sure if you were with us for the branding, but even more important to know your brand. But I always think of, and I could be off here, so correct me if I'm wrong, Carol, but I feel like entrepreneurship is, the way I see it, is about finding a need. If you center your venture around a real need, I think the customers are there. So, like, as opposed to doing something just to do it because you think, perhaps tapping into like a real need and centering it around that. And perhaps you approach that and feel that, become an expert at something that is important to you because it fits your brand. So that is the way I see that. And what are your thoughts on that, Carol?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to have to step away in just a minute for a second. Oh, yeah, thanks, James. Chicano por la Causa is another good resource. I've not thought of them recently. But yeah, so I would agree. I don't know if there's a place to look for customers other than the obvious answer of where they are. So by that, I mean, where are the people you want to help? So for example, as I put this, Change Your Channel is a new business for me, right? And today I wanted to offer something related to career change. So I'm guessing one of the platforms I really wanted to make this available on is LinkedIn. Because yes, job searchers are going to be on Facebook. Maybe they're on YouTube in the middle of the day, but probably not. A lot of people are on LinkedIn. And if they're not job searching, they know people who are. And I have to tell you guys, it was such a involved process to find a platform that would host on LinkedIn Live and do at least most of the things we wanted it to do. But that's where I wanted to be because I knew that's where my customers would be. So it depends on the nature of the job. So I think we talked a little bit, and if you're still thinking of example, dating, if you're looking at like starting a dating app, I would say Facebook would be a really good place. I also think depending on what it is, there's a theory in the world of coaching that you want to give before you get. And I believe that's true of any networking. Anytime I ever, as a director of career services, if I wanted to help students find jobs or graduates, I wouldn't go to an employer and say, hey, I got this graduate, can you hire him? I would start a relationship with an employer. And I do this every time I ask to meet with somebody new on LinkedIn. Hey, tell me more about your business and how I can support you. And then at some point, if I need help, then if I ask them. But the same is true if you have your own business with customers. I would say try to find a way to offer something of value first so that you create your brand and you create some brand awareness so that when you have something to sell, you have people to sell it to. So for example, an inexpensive way to do that would be posting short things on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. If you're not interested in being the one posting, then you don't have to post videos. You can post content because I know, Meredith, you have great writing abilities, right? So, or maybe you have some creative background. You create memes or you get somebody to do those for you. But I would say start by building a presence, especially if it's going to be an online business, and then create a presence in the spaces where your people will be, if that makes sense. Aaron, were you going to add to that?
No, I think, I just couldn't help, someone once told me, find an unmet need and become an expert at it. And I think doing that, kind of gives you something like, gives you something to sell and to offer, and all the ways that you just talked about. So I couldn't help to think about that. So that's all.
Yeah, no, that's a great, yeah. And I think I could also tell you for anybody looking to start their own online business, somebody who was really influential. There were two people who were influential for me. One is Lewis Howes, just for the type of work that he does. And the other is Brendan Bouchard. Brendan has a free 7-day course that you can take, and it teaches you how to set up kind of an online what do I want to say? I don't want to say a platform, but coaching. He will coach you on how to set up a coaching system. And just a side note, if you take that free class at the very end, he offers you for just $1 access to his whole library of stuff for a month. I would highly recommend taking that. I missed that because I waited till day 7 to watch all the videos, and I was in a hurry, so I missed it. But I paid $99, which is what it otherwise costs. And then I went in for a month and just read everything and watched everything because I was not trying to do it for more than 1 month. But they're just resources. I just found his to be helpful. I don't do everything he does because I don't approach it the same way, but it was very helpful. Okay, so we'll go to the next question.
Okay, yeah, sorry. I'm still kind of thinking about the last point. Just to be clear, I'm sorry. I think if you approach it, if I'm still using that terminology, unmet need, I mean, I feel like there's certain maybe needs or problems that maybe myself or Carol would be willing to tackle because it aligns with who we are. Whereas others, for example, like maybe the unmet need is in baking or something. So I just want to be clear on that, you don't have to I don't mean find something that's completely related or unrelated to your scope per se, but I just wanted to be clear on that. So again, my apologies if I'm getting off track here.
Nope, that's completely on track because it reminds us that we should be true to our brand. If your brand is super cute cookie making, that's your brand. And that's, if you're passionate about that and want to make a living at it, by all means. Absolutely. I just happen to know a little bit about what Meredith was talking about.
And then perfect. So next question coming in, you speak highly of LinkedIn. That being said, would it be best to first brand, resume, cover letter, then get into LinkedIn?
I don't know if I'm reading the same post, but
this is from Tina. And
what's that?
This is from Tina, and I might have skipped one, so I'll come back to Lizette. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yes, Tina, that's a great question. Tina's asking, yeah, I do talk highly about LinkedIn. I would make a LinkedIn profile, but I would not make it public until you've done the things that we're talking about today, meaning you really understand your personal brand and that also your resume is solid, because a lot of the content you're going to add to LinkedIn will come from your resume. And once you go live, I mean, it's not the worst case, but as soon as you publish your LinkedIn account, it starts connecting you with people you've worked with in the past. Every company you enter, every person you connect with, it just starts reaching out and spidering for you. And again, because we want to be mindful of first impressions, I would probably create your profile before publishing it. There is LinkedIn has a free tutorial on how to create a LinkedIn page that I can send out with the recording if I think about it. I'll make a note here. But again, I would only have a LinkedIn profile if it serves the industry that you're going into. If you're looking for something stress-free and you think, oh, you or anybody says, I really just want to have a house cleaning business, or I really want to do, I don't know, something that's, maybe more physically, or maybe you want to be a fitness trainer, something that's more physically challenging, but you get to step away from it at the end of the day, then consider if LinkedIn is going to add value for you. It might and it might not. Did you want to add to that, Aaron?
No, I agree with the points made there. Okay. And Lizette asks, and we'll probably jump into this here and in the upcoming session, but really quick. Is it worth the time and effort to do my resume in another language? I'm Puerto Rican and speak both English and Spanish. I just added my profile in Spanish on LinkedIn. I just think that's, like great for you, because I feel like it depends on the companies. And I mean, if they're primarily English speaking, then having one in English is awesome. But if what you're going for is primarily Spanish speaking, having that option as well. If you prefer, if you're more comfortable in one over the other, then maybe tailor two. But otherwise, just being just being able to have it in either way, I just is an added benefit in my opinion.
I would say it's same thing. I would agree with you, but I would also say only make a second resume if and when you feel your first is super solid and the second doesn't create more stress for you. Meaning, if you can accomplish your goals with one resume, I would do that. But as Aaron said, if you're looking for a job and English is going to be the primary language, I would put your resume in English and note the fact that you're bilingual somewhere in your objective statement. I don't think you have to have a separate profile or a separate resume to speak to that. Although impressive, I think it could be something that's not as valuable use of your time as go ahead and applying or connecting with people. The only time I can think of having, Spanish speaking or other language separate resume or profile would be if the company operated in that other language primarily, then yeah, I would have it in that other language. But I don't know that generally you need to.
Okay. Starting to ask, what happens if you had a job teaching, but there were budget cuts in the past? Is this about me or the economy? I would say sometimes, in my opinion, that sometimes it's not personal. It is more about the economy. But I mean, I think there are ways to still rise above that, even if it's so pay attention to trends, both job trends, both the economy, to maybe try to, not position yourself in such a way. So yeah, I don't know if it's always about one particular person. Sometimes, unfortunately, it is about where companies, what they value, where they're going to put their resources and efforts first. And so be mindful of that. Oh, you're on mute, Carol.
I sent you a private chat, Aaron. Yeah, I'll take a quick note at the at your question too, Sonia. Anytime you leave a job, you are allowed to ask for an exit interview, especially if you were laid off for some reason. They should give you a reason. I would say sometimes that's an uncomfortable conversation, so it's okay if you don't want to ask for that. But if you're still on good terms with your manager or someone at the company, I would circle back and ask that question, because even if the answer is, yeah, you just you weren't a fit, then you know the answer to the question. Because if teaching is something you're passionate about, maybe it's just a disconnect or miscommunication of your brand. Maybe you thought something was professional and they had different expectations. And so nobody told you this thing you're doing or not doing doesn't match. So then you could go, oh, it's like a Seinfeld episode for those who know what Seinfeld is. I was let go because I didn't use that punch clock. I used this other one instead. I didn't know that was a thing. You know what I mean? It could be really simple, or it could be that, hey, there are some things you want to change so that you're better fit and equipped for the next employer. But as Aaron said, sometimes if enrollment drops, teachers are let go. Now, I will say, somebody who's been in education for a number of years, and I don't know what grade we're talking about here in your instance, but I would always think of job security in terms of, if I am a contract teacher, meaning I only get to work if there are students, even though it's not part of my job description, I would try to do what I can to bring students because I want to be teaching them, right? So I might start posting on my social medias about how excited I am for this class to come to start. And I might tell my students, hey, ask your friends. Once you build a reputation, if you're teaching slightly older people, they can tell their friends to take your class as well. So it's hard to know exactly what happens without asking. So whenever you're in doubt, okay, so it is college students for you, Sonia. Yeah. So to Aaron's point, it probably was budget. If you were scheduled to teach every semester, I've taught many, many semesters, and I never know as an adjunct if my class is going to start or not. It depends on enrollment. But if you are passionate about teaching, I would start getting on your socials. First of all, manage it. Make sure you're seen as a college instructor in all the right ways. And then start talking about how excited you are. Create a presence for yourself around why you're passionate about your topic so that you have a following. And then you can say, I'm really hoping to teach this class. And then you have a better chance of getting it filled just by word of mouth and create the job for yourself. This seminar or this session that we're doing today came out of me doing extra work. And I usually have another session I do on workplace professionalism and how it's better to go above and beyond than do the bare minimum. But I didn't have a lot of career background before I took on some of my roles. And some colleges I've worked for didn't have any career services available for their students. And I was just an adjunct, meaning my job had nothing to do with career services, but I had the skill set and I knew I wanted more. Like you, Sonia, I want to take on other roles. I knew that for myself. So I started creating work for myself around my passion. And it continued to put me in new and better positions along the way just by following my passion and doing more than what was required of me as opposed to less than. I would highly recommend that for anybody. Aaron, can you, are you able to add anything about an experience when you were able to work out of your passion, meaning it led you to another place, or experience you have in terms of using your profile?
Well,
I'm going to step away for just a quick second while you do
sure
that.
thing. Yeah. Well, I've been in higher education for the last 15 years, and I'm also very passionate about teaching. And I have, as of very recent, started teaching. And similar to Carol, I work as a health sciences advisor, and I, started working with some program directors, and I just, in our conversations and some of the work that I was doing, realized that I was a good candidate to maybe teach an introduction class. And I, started behaving and representing myself in a way that fit what the college was looking for. And at this point in time, I'm actually now teaching. So I'm fairly new to it, but it's been great. So that is an example of something that I've done. So totally understand where you're coming from, Sonia. In a way, I, again, just kind of saw that need and realized that it's something that I can do and kind of rise up to that. And I have done that up to this point. At Tina, thank you. Tina says another great segment and look forward to the information for LinkedIn that will be found in the recording. So thank you so much for everybody's comments and questions up to this point. And thank you for everybody for being here today. So are there any other questions or points or comments? Well, if you guys stick with us, we will be here coming up. We will be transitioning into resume and cover letter writing here pretty soon. So again, the order of these are very specific. So hopefully by now you understand how important it is to brand yourself and to start that conversation, which of course will help you. When you are searching for a job, you can better align who you are with the company's values. And then after you've done that, now we will, coming up, discuss how to write your resume and format your cover letter, etc. Oh, another question. Do you feel your degrees have gotten you the doors open that normally wouldn't have been? For me personally, yes. At this point in my life, as I mentioned earlier, I majored in kinesiology. I was a health and wellness professional fitness coach, etc. And then I got a degree, a master's in educational leadership. I kind of got out of that. Fast forward to just, not too long ago. Now I'm bringing it all together, and I'm teaching exercise science. I'm coaching people in professional development. So I think for me personally, yes, um, it did take a while, and some of the work the conversations and the branding that we're, presenting, personally, full admission, is still very important for me too. And I have to be very mindful of these same things that we're talking about today. So good question.
Yeah, and I would say, Tina, to answer your question, with regard to myself and Aaron, our degrees have probably been helpful. Well, I mean, at least for me, I'll speak just for myself. My degree has been helpful because I was in higher education. And I chose higher education because when I sat and thought about what do I want to do all day that's appropriate and legal, I said, I like talking and I like have other people making me think. How can I do that? And I already had a bachelor's in communication, but it reminded me I wanted to go back to get a master's. And then that's what led me to working in higher education. But I'll be very clear. I've been in higher education for 20 some years. I don't think it's the be all end all for every career path. The way you know if it's worth investing in a degree is to start looking at the jobs that you're interested in, like on Indeed or LinkedIn with the alerts that I was talking about. And if you're finding that they don't mention anything about a degree, I would say, maybe don't jump right out and get it. Also, if there is a degree requirement, does the company, or at least if it's not required for that particular entry level, but maybe down the road, see if the company is one that pays for it. Right. So I'm a huge proponent of higher education, to be clear, super clear, but I don't think it's needed for every career path. The jobs will tell you whether you need it or not. Tony's with us. I'm so excited.
I would agree, Tony. But just to expand on your point, Carol, yeah, I don't know if it's always an actual degree as well. So sometimes it's maybe it's just a class. So of course, I work in higher education, and I'm a big believer in it. But I am also very understanding to the point, like, for example, maybe it's just a social media marketing class at a local community college that is going to help you out. So you're very intentional and thoughtful about the skills you need because you want to do this because it aligns with your brand. So maybe it's just one class, not so much a degree, or maybe it's a few classes, you get a certificate, but or maybe it is a bachelor's degree or a master's. So very good point, Carol. I think you're 100% correct. And welcome, Tony.
Hi, Tony.
Hi.
Great. You're welcome. Yeah, great timing. Great questions, everybody. Thanks for asking and liking and loving the content. Let's go ahead and switch gears because at 11 o'clock, this is the session that I think most people tune into. So Tony, you haven't been with us yet, but I will transition to the PowerPoint for just a second. We'll do some introductions. And then we'll kick off. We'll get started. We'll start with Nathan's question. Sorry, I'm scrolling and it's not scrolling because I have to click a thing. So if you're just joining us, thank you. If you've been with us, I'm so sorry. It'll be another 2 minutes of information you've heard before about who we are and what we're doing here today. But my name's Carol Redden. I'm the owner of Change Your Channel, which is the organization hosting this today. My background, I have a 20 or so years in higher education, and within that, helping people develop personally and professionally. I also have a bachelor's. I can't talk, but I have a bachelor's and master's in communication. And I've taught a lot of classes, obviously related to communication, but also related to career development. And then I also worked as a director of career services for several years, met with many, many employers, HR managers, recruiters about what is needed to apply for jobs, maintain jobs, get the more, valued, and what they were not finding in candidates. And so I learned a lot. And over the years, I've given seminars and workshops like this. I've helped people coach them individually. And this particular session came out of lots of people I know wanting me to either help kids, their kids, or neighbors or friends or themselves. And I just didn't have all of the time. I do professional coaching, but it's hard to get to everybody. So I thought, let me just do this and make the recording available for folks to try to help as many people as I can. That's enough about me. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Aaron and Tony for quick introductions. We'll talk a little bit about what Change Your Channel means, and we'll get right into our session. So, Aaron.
Yeah, Carol, so glad that you're doing this. And I've said it earlier, thank you for having me. My name is Aaron, and I have spent the last 15 years in higher education, helping many people with their professional development, helping achieve their education and career goals. Before that, I was a personal trainer, strength and conditioning coach. So coaching is a big part of what I do, and it still is. So again, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Mr. Coates, I can't wait. So excited.
Yes, hi, Carol, and hi, Aaron. My background is I'm an ex-IT executive. I used to work for the big pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca in the IT function, managing quality control, information security, and ethics and code of conduct, and of course managed a fairly large international team just before throughout my career and just before I left. I've now been retired from that industry since 2015, and since I moved to Scottsdale in Arizona, I've been volunteering as a career coach. So I've been doing coaching and career advising, LinkedIn advising, interview techniques, all of the above since 2017. I also chair the computer learning group from the Scottsdale City of Library function, and I chair that advisory group where we give free computer classes to folks that can sign up. We've been doing that through the pandemic remotely. Now we're back in person again. So great to be here, and hope I can pass on some good advice to those listening.
Thanks, Tony. I did mention, because we touched a little bit on Vista del Camino earlier. I mentioned that for folks who need help with just using Microsoft Word, I think, Lisette, we were talking about that, just to know how to create a resume and format it, that you do have those services. So thank you for that. I want to talk just for a second about what it means to change your channel and how it relates to today. Your channel is the way in which you're exchanging energy with with yourself, but also with other people to experience the world around you. It's kind of like what you're tuning into on television. And as you can imagine, then you are fully in control of that. So we change our channel by changing our thoughts, feelings, and actions. Sometimes we can do this all together. Sometimes we just can only change one and the others follow. But the point I want to make is that at any given time, all day, every day, you can change your channel. If you're in what we call a lower vibe space and you're not happy with that, you can choose to move up the vibrational energy scale. And if you are somebody who's getting ready to job search, or you're finding that you're in an unhappy place with your job search, or your current career, I should say, I think you want to start being mindful of, okay, well, what are your thoughts, feelings, and actions around your current career, so that you can get those in check and adjust them, so that when you start taking action, you welcome a fantastic opportunity. In one of my posts, I mentioned so many people, and I don't know, Tony and Aaron, if you guys have had this experience, but so many times I talk to people about the career change process, and it's never we can't just start with the resume. There's a lot of work to talk about before you even get to the resume. And that's why these sessions, as Aaron said, were structured in the way they were. If you just tuning in and you missed either of the first two sessions, I recommend going back, because you will save yourself a lot of time and make this experience much more rewarding. If you really think about what it is you want, what's important to you, that's all part of the branding. And then you are really strategic about how you search for jobs, so that when you sit down to create a resume, you have everything you need. What you don't want to think about with regard to your resume is a kitchen sink. Just put a bunch in there willy-nilly and see what happens. Because that is not a good look, right? If you think about anybody's kitchen sink. So instead, today, as we talk about resume writing, the thoughts, feelings, and actions are going to come through on your resume, whether you're ready for it or not, which is, again, why we cover all of these topics. So again, we just finished personal branding, job searching. We move now to resume and cover letter. And I will be the first to acknowledge on this platform, the amount of space I have to show you a resume and cover letter is very tiny. So we will walk through it. We'll go through section by section and talk about formatting and content. But I acknowledge that it's not as big as I would like it to be. If you're at home, whether you're watching this on a recording or you want to watch it on recording later, and you can project this to your television, or you can put YouTube on your television, like I have a Roku, I watch YouTube on TV, it will help make it a little bit bigger. But I acknowledge, I will read you the content because I acknowledge it can look a little bit fuzzy. I really just wanted you to see the formatting for the most part. Okay, so having said that, that brings us up to speed. What you're looking at here is a chronological resume. There are two main types of resumes, and Nathan, we will get into your question here if Aaron will share that with us. But the two main types of resumes would be chronological and functional. And then you could also separately, some people will have a curriculum vitae. The type we're talking about today is chronological, which serves a lot of people who, especially if they're changing fields, this could work. Functional resume is a separate conversation, and we only really have time for one. So I chose chronological for today. Before I get into the sections, Aaron, would you mind reading our comment?
Not at all. And great question, Nathan. I just wanted to get the introduction out first because you bring up some good points. And now that we've introduced the next session, let me go ahead and ask because I think it's going to lead to some good conversation. So, regarding resume writing, any insights or suggestions regarding inclusion of responsibilities or achievements that can be measured when the field or role I'm trying to leave doesn't have much that is measured? I can't really count the number of patients I see or providers I work with. There isn't a mechanism to go back and review how much my role has saved the healthcare system, and the additional responsibilities I've taken or created sounds small as compared to the roles. And then it cuts off from hold on, let me see if I can. I think I'm missing part of that.
Oh, you're posting it right now.
Whoops, sorry.
That's okay. I mean, it is cut off. Let me see if I can find it on the LinkedIn. So we'll just hide that. That's okay. I think I can see it. Uh-oh. It's like Beyonce over here. Let's see. And now it's showing again. Okay. Oh, sorry. It's showing now. You guys see the comment pop up on LinkedIn now. We showed it a little bit ago, but let's see. I'm looking to transition to some that maybe some self-imposed limiting. Okay. Some limiting beliefs. Okay. So the question is, what if I'm changing careers and I'm having a hard time quantifying my past experience? I would say that's okay. One of the things we'll talk about in terms of content is, anytime you can quantify your work experience, you helped this number of people, you saved this much money, you achieved this specific goal, you can use this specific software, fantastic, do it. Be as specific as you can. There are times when you have to approximate. So for example, Nathan, I have been teaching almost every year. I've had as many as 700 students at a time in one semester, but I've never counted how many total students. So on my website, I think I say something like thousands because I don't know how many. I just have an approximate based on the number of classes, the number of students. You might have the same from charting. How many approximate charts do you do a day, per month, per week, that kind of thing. And then you can approximate. But I wouldn't worry. If it's not something you can quantify, I wouldn't beat yourself up about it, because if you're changing fields anyway, and you say, I saw 600 patients, somebody who's not in the healthcare field doesn't know if that's good or bad. But what you can say is something like a very high level, or you know what I mean? Something to that extent. And here to the last part of your comment, this is true for everybody. I'm just going to say it bluntly. Don't think about what you can't do or haven't done. Think about what you can do and what you have done. Reframe that. Change your channel in terms of how you think about it. Aaron, Tony, did you guys want to add to that?
Just that I kind of had the same, like I really had a hard time quantifying, and in my work with you, Carol, and in our conversation, you said just, you know, like explained it just the way you just presented it, told me the same thing. So really good point in response to Nathan's question.
Yeah, I had a client yesterday, and he wants to move into the tourism industry. And we worked on exactly those things, trying to quantify his achievements in his previous roles. Some we were able to do, and some we weren't. So not too much to worry about. We've got a few. I mean, it's nice to have dimensions to your achievement statements, but if you don't have it, then as Carol says, don't beat yourself up. It's good that you've got a few perhaps, but you don't have to have it everywhere across the resume.
Absolutely. Just do what you can. That's a great question. And again, let us know, Nathan, if you still have more questions based on that. But that really speaks to the content. I want to first talk about the formatting, and we'll just go top to bottom because the formatting is the easier thing to talk about. Really, I think it goes a little bit quicker, and most of our questions are usually on content. There are three of us here, and quite frankly, if you had individual conversations with us, you might get three different pieces of advice. That's why I like having three of us here, because I want you to know what different options are. At the top of the page, it should have your name. So it should reflect your brand, your style, and everything that you feel good about. So if I recommend something and Tony or Aaron recommends something else, do what feels right for you. And the same would be true for any website that tells you they can make you the best resume that will get you the job. I would go, I don't know, because I could look at it and Tony could look at it, Aaron could look at it, and we go, I'd really rather see it this way. The other quick note I want to say about writing a resume is Aaron and Tony and I have done this seminar together now several times, not always in an hour. We usually have more time. But we all have experiences where we asked people, who helped you make this resume? Where did you come up with this? And they go, oh, I paid someone $300. And all they walked away with is a PDF document that they can't change. I would say don't fall into that trap. That's why I teach this, is so that people can create their own. That's why Tony teaches free Microsoft Word classes. And like I said, I think they probably exist in every community. Once you know what should be, what shouldn't be on a resume, and you can get help with the formatting, I would say just do it yourself if you can. And if not, just be sure you at least get a Word document and you understand how to change it and update it over time. You don't want to walk away with a PDF document that you can't change and you're out $300. So having said that, the very top part is in the header section. There is a header section in every Microsoft Word document, and I recommend putting your name, phone number, email, and if you have like a LinkedIn or other profile page that relates to your industry, meaning that it makes sense for the employer to look at, then I would list that in the header section so that the top of every one of your pages, assuming you have more than one, which is okay, that they all look the same. If you ever get a letter from, let's say, a bank or some company, it's on letterhead, which means it looks official. And this is just one way for you to stand out as somebody who's part of or has a professional brand, is just to have your document look professional. So the other thing I would want to point out is notice, you may or may not be able to see, but for the email address, it says firstname.lastname _lastname@gmail.com. That's an example. You don't have to create a new email, but what you don't want to do is have an email that identifies how old you are, ideally, or that you're somebody's parent, or that you're sexy, or what you like to drink. Not because it's partly it's inappropriate, but partly because it could be the things you're offering. Somebody couldn't legally ask you, like, are you a parent? So why say Jacob's mom? But also it's a missed opportunity, as we were talking about with Meredith, to brand yourself. I want them to be thinking of me, Carol Redden. And so it makes sense that my email would be carol.redden@gmail.com. That reminds them of me. I don't know if you guys have had this, but so many times I go to call a candidate and the name at the top is like Scott Jones. And then the email address is like Stephen Jacobs. And I'm like, what, did I email the right guy? And then it causes me confusion. And if I am sorting through lots of resumes to figure out who to call or email, I don't want to be confused. Okay, so you want to try to make it as clear and applicable as possible. I know it sounds really simple, but you'd be surprised how many resumes I see with Sexy Lady 52 and Jacob's mom and stuff like that. Guys, do you want to comment on anything in the header section?
I would definitely add that if you're going to put your LinkedIn profile address, make sure you've gone into the LinkedIn profile and edited that URL, that universal resource locator, so that you don't have Tony.Coates ABC 1 2 3 4 5 6. You try and get rid of those funky characters at the end, and then you find that the LinkedIn profile address is something very simple, like Tony Coates in my case. And out of, if I can give a statistic, Carol, there's some 700 million people on LinkedIn. I'm the only one that has a URL profile out of that number of people that just says Tony Coates. Of all the Anthony Coateses and Tony Coateses in the world, there's only one there. So it's very easy for me to say to a prospective employer or a colleague, here's my LinkedIn profile, and you'll find me right away. So that's what I would add, and definitely agree with all the comments about the email address. Create a new one if you have to, or make sure it pushes your brand and pushes your name and nothing else.
Yep, I agree. Personalize that URL for LinkedIn if you can. Well, you can. It's just a matter of how soon you do it. Will you get your name or not? Aaron, do you want to take and read Sonia's question or address it, or would you read it and I'll address it?
So Sonia says, yes, especially your resume, use your real name and be real with your address and phone number.
Do you know what I would say about that?
I think you're going to say something about the address.
I am. Yeah. You guys have heard me do this so long. I'm glad you said that. Notice that well, again, you may not be able to see it, but I don't recommend putting your home address on a resume, particularly with sites like Indeed and LinkedIn or anywhere you can post it. Your address doesn't need to be floating around the internet. The only time I would put a physical address on a resume is if you're sending it directly to the company and you live within like 20 minutes, 30 minutes of that company. It's not supposed to happen, but employers tell me all the time, oh, this person lives too far. Now, with the economy the way it is, they might just call whomever. But when jobs are not as plentiful, Sonia, if you are an hour away, I might go, if I'm the employer, I might go, she's going to be late. She's going to call in. This creates a hassle for me. I want somebody who's a little more local. Okay, so partly for your safety and partly because you don't want to give the employer any reason to screen you out. So I would only add your physical address if it adds a benefit, and then only if you're going to send it to a specific employer. I would never post it online.
Carol, I might beg to differ a little bit on that.
Okay.
You could put just the city and state and nothing else, but definitely not your street address because of privacy concerns.
Yeah, and you make a good point. Sorry to cut you off. If you are moving out of state, let's say, Sonia, you're open to relocating and you already know where you're going and it's near this other place, then yeah, if it makes sense then to have the city and state. You're right. That is a great exception, Tony. I don't use it just because they can usually tell I'm local by my jobs, my past jobs, or I can mention it in the cover letter, but also I don't want to jam up the top of my header section. But you absolutely could include that. Yeah. the objective. This is the first thing on this resume that you see here is the word objective. It's a section. And I want to stop here and take a second to say, this is more of a formatting thing, but what you see, your objective does not have to be first. The way you order, let me say two things. Only have an objective if you're clear about your objective, number one. And also the order of your sections should be determined by the most important thing for the employer. Every choice you make should be what benefits the employer. What do you think is most important to him or her? Generally, the objective is at the top if you're going to have an objective, right? Because they're not going to scroll all the way down to see that. But so many times I talk to people who aren't clear what their objective is. In the objective I have here, I'll read it to you because I don't know if you can see it, is to obtain XYZ position. So you're going to name it, which will utilize X number of years or of XYZ experience, this specific skill, and a passion for something. So that's just a lot of jargon to say, be specific about what you have to offer and what you're looking for. For example, Lisette might say something like, depending on the field she wants to go into, to obtain this position, that maybe she's making a career change and she thinks, or Nathan is making a career change, and you don't have the technical skills, let's say, for the new job, but you do have lots of experience working with people. You might refer to customer service skills or leadership skills or management skills or software. And then you might also say, oh gosh, what was I going to, oh, and you're bilingual. Somehow mention in there that you're bilingual. That is a great place. So it pops off the page for them. Any other, do you guys want to add anything to objective section?
Yeah, I'd like to suggest possible alternative.
Yes, great.
To objective. We're finding, particularly when we're helping folks find jobs through the Career Center, that something like a qualifications summary is much more powerful. So say experienced IT executive with 30 years experience in information security, quality management, project management, and process engineering. So that's why summary in one line.
Yes,
right?
I was just going to say that, in which case it's still succinct.
Right, thank you. Yes. So it doesn't tell the prospective employer what my objective is, because sometimes a hiring manager doesn't really care what your objective is. They only care that you have the qualifications and these, the experience and so on that can help them succeed. So it's an alternative. You can use either, I would think, but don't try and put both on there. Just use either, because you don't have the space for both.
Right. It needs to be an either or. Also, I think an objective is if you can really quantify succinctly and connect it to what you want, I think then an objective is a great way to go. Meaning you make it very clear within objective statement that I want this job. I don't want just any job. This is the job I'm looking for, and maybe with this company. But a summary statement, you're right. If you have the ability to write a summary, it just paints a picture in a different way. So it's an either or, whatever you're most comfortable with.
Couple comments, questions. Would you like to see my resume? I'm not sure if that is a question for us, Sonia.
We would not probably be able to look at a resume. I have to tell you guys, it's really tight on time to even talk about this sample in an hour. And I will say also, for me personally, helping somebody with a resume takes a few hours to do, top to bottom.
On my resume, I don't have an objective, but instead I list my target job title as it relates to my job experience. So more of a comment to.
I think that's a Meredith question. I would, just the way it shows up here, I would be interested to know what you call that section, because as Tony said, I don't know if an employer knows what a target job title is. As long as you're clear about, you can use any word you want. I would just say again, the lens that you want to look at your resume with is not, does this make sense to you, but does it make sense to somebody who doesn't know you? And does it make sense to the person you want to hire you for that job? Think about writing a resume like you would asking somebody out for a date, or you being asked out for a date. If somebody says, hey, I saw you sitting over there, you look like a human being, would you like to go on a date? You're like, that's like the low bar, right? That's like throwing a resume out to like anybody. An employer's like, oh, you just want any job? Whereas if somebody asks you for a date and says, wow, you look a certain way, or I find you very smart, or something specific, would you like to go? You're like, oh, you see me, you understand who I am, and you want to move forward. Great. An employer wants the same thing. They want to know that you've put in work to be very intentional about that employer for that job as much as you can. For anybody reaching out, asking if you can stay in touch with me, you can go to my website. Right now, I don't have any of my coaching set up. I haven't activated it yet because I wanted today to just be about something that's free. But I do personal and small group, or I should say individual and small group coaching, which is at changeyourchannel.life. So for sure. And you can connect on LinkedIn as well. The next section that we see here is, I call it professional experience. You can call it what you like, but what I don't recommend is calling it work experience, just because it sounds better to call it professional. Again, we're thinking of getting you seen as a professional, so we want to use that word. Work sounds like something that you had to do, so it's less impactful, I think. I'll just say a couple quick things and I'll turn it over to the gentleman to add to it. But when you're trying to decide formatting wise, again, we're focusing on format. Do you want to bold the company name or your job title? My answer to that is do bold whichever one is strongest. Sorry, I hit my microphone there. It doesn't have to be bold. I think bold stands out a little better, but I would not be willy-nilly with your bold choices, meaning put everything in bold, because then it loses its effect. So be very strategic in terms of what you choose to put in bold, and then be consistent about it. That's a second rule of thumb. First rule of thumb is do what makes the most sense for the employer. Second would be consistent with your formatting. So if you feel like the job titles you've had add more value, let's say those of you making a career change, you don't need to showcase that you were at XYZ hospital as much as you were maybe an administrator, right? Because then that focuses on your middle ground, which is more business oriented than the healthcare. We don't need to showcase a hospital unless, let's say you're a nurse watching this and you did some clinical rotations at a great hospital, then I might say it's more helpful to bold the hospital name than the title of, clinical rotation. Does that make sense? So I would just make a choice and then stick with it throughout. I would also list the city and state and the dates. As far as what you decide to put content-wise, we'll talk about that in a second. But I would say this consistency is key again with these bullets. Bullets are great. They draw the attention to the eye, and then make them consistent all throughout your whole resume. They should align. Your bullets should not start and stop in different places for each section. They should all be the same size and in the same place on the left-hand side of your resume. Guys, do you want to talk about any formatting stuff for the professional experience? And I guess we can get into the content too.
Yeah, Carol. What I was going to say was that have you been talking about application tracking systems at all today?
Not yet.
Okay. Do you want me to get into that now, or should I wait?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those that are listening, virtually every company, or certainly large company, even medium to large companies now, will use what's called an application tracking system. So your resume goes through a computer before it even gets to a human. So it's very key that you don't use special formatting. And I like what Carol's put in front of us here, because there isn't really any special formatting apart from a few visual effects like bolding and bullets and so on. But keep, you don't need a photograph on there. You don't need sidebars. You don't need color scheme and so on. So it's very important that you do minimize the amount of formatting, and bold and a few bullets is probably about as much as you would want to put into here, because that application tracking system might not be able to read your resume, and then you never even get past the first screening process. So bear that in mind. Just search on application tracking systems if you want more info on that.
Thank you for that, Tony. And also, you make a great point. What I did here, and by the way, I use the same resume template, whether I'm helping somebody who's a senior representative from a company transition or my nieces and nephews with their first job. My nieces and nephews, they don't have as much content, so their font size might be 12 instead of 10, and the margins might be a little bigger. But what Tony's talking about, when you get those resume templates, and I do not recommend using a resume template from really anywhere, because most of them have lots of white space. White space suggests a lack of something, I think, or it's like a whole 2-inch deal, colorful slide along the left-hand side, and it might look appealing, but it takes away space from your content, which is that's your selling point, is what you have to offer. So I would focus on the content, not the style. The only exception to that would be graphic design. Then maybe have some really cool graphic on here somewhere. But to Tony's point, this is why I say take a Microsoft Word class. I recommend just type all your content in top to bottom, and then worry about the formatting. Maybe have somebody help you if you need it. I would not use a template, because so many of them will just cause frustration. They only give you 2 entries for work experience or 1 entry for volunteer, but you have more than that. And then you'll just get really frustrated.
Very good points. Yeah, just sorry to interrupt. Just a couple comments coming through. So, was the best email for your resume to use iCloud or Yahoo? I mean, my response would be, as long as the more of a professional. I don't know if it matters. Personally, if I do a resume, I use more of it. It just depends. If I'm gonna apply outside of my organization, perhaps maybe I try to stick with my personal email more than like a company or a school affiliated email. That's me personally. And then I believe I think a comment, YouTube is showing the resume, and then our pictures. LinkedIn might have a delay where it's only showing the job searching strategies. So sorry for any LinkedIn users.
Well, I'm looking at a LinkedIn page, and it has the resume on it. So there might have been a delay for some computers, but I think we're okay.
Okay.
And as far as the email, I would recommend, the only thing I would say, yes, keep it professional and appropriate. But if you're worried about people knowing how old you are, then don't use an AOL email address because that's a giveaway. Otherwise, no, just keep it professional and appropriate.
Or live mail.
Yes, exactly. Tina, I love the question about how many pages. If you follow the golden rule, which the first one is do what makes the most sense for the employer for that job. My answer to that question is, when I'm coaching somebody to make a resume for the first time, I tell them put everything in it, all of your professional experience, all your volunteer work, if you have any military, everything that's been accounting for your time, put it in there first. And then when you get ready to tailor it to a job and employer, then you take out some things and move things around and whatever, but initially put everything in to give yourself a full template. I would say if you don't have really big margins, lots of white space, if your font is, already 10 points, meaning it's not very big, and you go to a second, third page, but everything there adds value, don't worry about how long it is. However, if you have a lot of white space, or your font's already too big, or you have lots of, again, space for your margin, or you have a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be there, then you don't need even 2 pages. More is not better. But there are lots of people, there used to be people who kept the same career for their whole lifetimes once upon a time. That's not the world we live in now. People are changing careers, and you could choose to do a functional resume and make things a little more concise. But I only see 1-page resumes for people who've been in the same field for many, many years. I don't know. I just don't see any one-page resumes anymore. And I don't see a reason to try to fit everything on one page and then leave some valuable stuff out. Do you guys want to comment on that?
I guess I would comment only insofar as a hiring manager in my time dealing with lots and lots of hiring. As a manager, you generally are only spending, upwards of a minute.
Oh, it's best.
So, as Carol has said, I think before, make sure if you are going to have a multi-page resume, make sure the important stuff is on that first page. Because if I have to read all the way down to the end of the first page and I'm still looking at job title after job title after job title after job title, and I haven't got to your education yet, I may get bored and say, you know what, this person doesn't really know what's important, so I don't want to see this any further. And that goes into the round filing cabinet underneath my desk.
Which is called the trash can.
Exactly.
Or recycle or shredder.
Yes. So, if you are going to have multi-page, make sure the important stuff's up front and reshape it to make sure that's the case. Definitely.
Yeah, and I agree with that. We only have 20 minutes left, so I think what I want to do is just give a quick rundown on some other tips for formatting so we can really dive into the content, because I think the formatting is going to come down to choice. And Lisa, I saw your question. We'll definitely touch on that. But what you'll see here is I have a section under professional experience. My next section is called civic engagement. That's just another way of saying volunteer because it's a more popular term. You could certainly call it whatever you want. What I want to point out here is that having that section sets you apart from lots of other, I'd say at least 85% of other candidates. If you in fact do or have volunteered, I would say, great, have that section. I have on my resume or my CV either, I have almost as many entries for civic engagement as I do for employment, but I keep my civic engagement sections a little more brief because there's no need to elaborate. The number of bullets you put under each job depend on how valuable the job is to the new employer. So Nathan, this is a good tip for you and Lisette as well, maybe Lisa. If you had a job that's completely not related or was not as valuable in terms of there isn't any new skill beyond what could be picked up from another job, then just have one or two bullets. The jobs that offer the new employer the most should have the most bullets. Okay, so for those of you in college or fresh out of college, if you had to have a job at like Burger King or Kentucky Fried Chicken or whatever, because for whatever reason you had that for 3 or 4 years, don't leave that off because it still accounts for your time. Go ahead and talk about whatever things you did that can relate to the new employer, like being on time, great customer service, working at a fast pace, but maybe just give us one bullet. Don't spend a lot of time talking about that job if you're trying to get into marketing, right? So civic engagement is formatted the same way as the professional experience section, meaning whatever I bolded in one section, that type of information I bold in the next. My bullets look the same. I keep it succinct. The shorter your lines can be, the better. Some of these lines, which we'll get to in a second, you see that they look a little longer. And that's because I pulled verbiage right from a job posting and I tweaked it to fit what the employer would want. But most of your bullets should be succinct. They should be a little bit shorter if possible, because as Tony said, the person's going to scan your resume and typically it's like 10 seconds is what you get. A minute's just like super leisurely. The person had lots of time. There's an education section for if you are in high school or college and you're studying the thing you want to start doing, your education section might need to be at the top. If you're making a career change based on the education you're getting, your education might need to be at the top because it's the most relevant to the new job that you're going to apply for. For people mid-career, if they're staying in the same field, they need to know you have the education, but it doesn't need to be at the top. And then I just add a section, under education, you'll notice I put sections or placeholders there for courses. This is really helpful for people making career changes who, let's say you're going from, I don't know, criminal justice to marketing, and you've taken some great marketing classes and now you want to get your foot in the door with marketing. It's helpful for the employer to know you've had these 3 marketing classes and you're not just floating around with no marketing experience. The military service section is formatted exactly the same way as all the others. Again, for consistency, you don't want your format to cause a distraction. You want it to be so clean, simple, clear, easy that the employer can scan the content. This was a snapshot of what it would look like. Again, I tried to make it least amount of content that I could make big enough for you guys to see. But obviously a resume would have more than this, and it could have a couple other sections depending on your experience. Do you guys want to comment on formatting before we take questions on content? Anything else that I missed? Okay. Again, a standard margins are 1 inch all the way around. You could go 1 1/4, but I think if you have any amount of experience, I'd probably go 1 inch. Font type would be somewhere between 10 and 12. Font size. Font type is common as like Courier New. I prefer Times New Roman. But don't use, really flowery, creative, fancy fonts unless you're applying for a fancy, flowery kind of job. Even then, would you have it on a resume, or would you need a resume? I don't know. Sorry, Aaron, you've been waiting to say something.
No, I think I was going to be more of a question, which I think might be a good segue into the content, and then maybe I'll, address some of the comments and questions here. But just to clarify, when you talk about using maybe 10, a minute tops on your resume, if you're applying and there's a bunch of people, and you talk about using being very strategic, so yours is not just thrown at the bottom of the pile or in the garbage, if you will. Can you be a little bit more clear? Like, are you using what are you doing to catch the eye? Are you using specific job posting terminology and those bullet points? Like, what are you doing? So maybe just talk a little bit more about how to avoid being that person's resume that gets thrown away.
Yeah, well, one of the things I recommend, and Tony, I know you go through this as well, so we can feel free to add on, but since we're turning the corner and focusing on content, every word you put on the page should be adding value. We're not looking for fluffs just so it looks like you have more, because employers can see through that. Every word should be intentional. So you want to try to start each bulleted item with a strong action verb that matches the job you want. And a great way to do that is to look at the job posting. And again, in the last hour, we talked about setting up job alerts so you can see all the marketing jobs and what the requirements are. If you're monitoring those, or you're engaging with groups on LinkedIn, you know the kinds of the requirements that they want, the skills that they want, the tasks they're going to have you do. So ideally, again, you put all your content in a resume, and then you can format it before or after. But then I would go through each of your bulleted items and try to include as many of the key terms from the job posting that actually apply to you as possible. And they will usually start with key verbs as well, like managed or facilitated. Quick side note, if you're somebody who's looking to be like a medical assistant, you don't want to overshoot your experience. You want to use the word assisted a lot, right? So yeah, I would say start with a strong key action verb with every bullet, and then use as much terminology as you can from the job posting that you want. And 3 would be quantify your experience. So if they say you managed to manage people, you would want to say, I manage a team of 7, if that's how much you managed. That's one thing I would say. Tony, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Action verb is very key. Again, going back to the application tracking system, if the job description, and I'll sort of, hopefully folks can see my hands, if the job description requires these 5 things and your resume only has 2 of them, then it's never going to get past the application tracking system. So if you're applying for that job, obviously you cannot tell little white lies or anything else on your resume. But if you have all 5 of those, make sure those 5 keywords, as Carol said, are somewhere in that resume, and are actually, key part of the screening process. When it finally gets to a human and that person is reading the resume, then they also want to see that you've actually addressed that, which leads you to think, well, perhaps I'm going to need more than one resume. Absolutely. If you're trying to find work or change careers into a different location or a different company, then maybe you need more than one version of your resume. I don't know whether you're going to cover that, Carol, but that's a thought you may have to have, and keep those different resumes based on what you're applying for.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of why I like the specific objective statement, or that's why having a summary statement is great. Having a summary statement allows you to be a little bit more vague in terms of here's a little about me, not really being super clear about what I want. But either way, in the word choices you use for each of your bulleted items should be very clear about what it is you want and how your skills apply to the job. So for example, if you want to be in education, like for me, who is it? Sonia, I think, yeah, this might apply to you. I might have one for administrative roles, which I do, and then one for teaching, because I will focus on different things in each resume. A quick note I also want to add under the education section, because I know we'll have a lot of college and maybe high school folks here. Actually, two things. One is the grade point average. I don't know. I hear mixed reviews from employers. Some say they don't care. Some say they look for it. So my advice is, as far as a grade point average, and this is for anybody, if it's competitive, go ahead and throw it on there. If it's not, then don't. You'll know what's competitive for your field. In some fields, the 3.0 is competitive. In business and anything STEM related, 3.0 is not competitive. So grain of salt, I would say, if you're in honors or any of those clubs, anything like that, go ahead and add it. But keep in mind, it's all in perspective of the employer. If the employer doesn't spend much time talking about extracurriculars in school, then maybe you don't need to take space on your resume for all of that. The only time high school should be on a resume is if you are in high school or you just graduated like 3 months prior. Like high school graduates right now, you're getting ready to graduate in a few weeks, then yeah, that makes sense. But as soon as you start college and turn that corner, I think you want to go ahead and start leaving high school off of your resume, because we want them to see you as a college student. Go ahead.
Which was one of the questions that came through, and I'm sorry if you've addressed this already, but I'm going to go ahead and Perfect. So Lisa asks, it's maybe a content question, but how far back should you go with time-wise? Should I stick with just the past 5 years or so?
I don't think so. I don't think it's the same as doing research. I know you're still in school, Lisa, and so research says, yeah, you want to go back 5 years or so for your sources, or no more than. Tony and Aaron might disagree. I say 10 years is what I think is the norm. However, I might sneeze. The caveat to that would be, I think if you have something super valuable and relevant that's beyond 10 years, by all means include it. Because if you, let's say, took a break and you were doing that 10 years ago, yeah, some things have changed, but it's nice to know you're not starting completely from scratch. So again, the golden rule is whatever makes the most sense for the employer reading the resume. What information does that person need to know to hire you? If you only go back 5 years, I don't think that paints a very clear picture, especially if you have a lot of work experience. The only folks I think who would only go back 5 years are traditional college students who maybe only have 5 years of experience, is what I would recommend. Do you guys want to add to that? You see that any differently?
No, I mean, I agree with you on that. If it's very relevant to what you're, the position you're trying to obtain, then yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, my comment on that, Carol, would be, we definitely recommend 10 years as a maximum. However, your point about, okay, I did some, I don't know, making something up here. I did some process design work, and that was 15 years ago. And what I learned from that was X, Y, and Z. Well, that's very important, because now I'm applying for a job that's about process redesign. So that has to be on the resume somewhere. Again, back to that application tracking, screening process, and keywords being there on the document. It has to be there, even if it was longer than the 10 years. But generally speaking,
Yeah.
about a decade is about what you would normally put on a resume.
Yep. I want to go ahead and answer these last couple questions and then switch very quickly over to cover letters. Aaron, do you mind?
Sure thing. So Lizette asks, one of my passions is volunteering. It's part of my LinkedIn profile. How I decide which orgs to include. Oh, how do I decide which orgs to include? My apologies. Would it be the most current ones?
Lisette, I list all of mine. However, like I said, here on the example, you see civic engagement, you see the organization name, the title, and then some bullets. Put everything in your resume first, all of your volunteer experience, all of it. And then if it looks like you need to shorten it, just don't have a lot of bullets. Just have maybe the title and the name. I like to see what people have done with their time, especially if you had to work, let's say you're raising kids or caring for a family member or whatever, so you didn't get to have the most challenging job. But I'd like to see that you were volunteering, because for me as an employer, that's very valuable. It means you're willing to do more than the average person. I list all of mine, and I'd like to see it in other people. Also, consider that every time you put something on there, it's one more way to connect with the person who's interviewing you. I've had times before where I did a half marathon one time, and I had a PF Chang's the certificate of completion because it was a big deal for me in my office. And people I was interviewing were like, "Oh my gosh, you did that! I volunteered there." And now we have something to talk about that bonds us outside of just, do you want the job? Because we both cared about this cause that we have in common. So I personally have all of it listed. And I would, if you have 30 years and I mean, that tells us something, Lisette. If you have 30 years of volunteer experience and you're looking at making a career change, I don't know if you've considered, but a not-for-profit might be a great venue for you to look at, put a lot of your work to work for you. I personally would find a way to list it succinctly, but I would list it because it adds 30 years of your time. And as a quick note too, for people who took a break to raise kids, a family member, what have you, I personally think you can quantify that time by giving yourself either a volunteer entry or a professional experience entry and saying, calling yourself something like volunteer caregiver, and then only list the job duties, if you will, that relate to that employer. I don't think you have to have that gap, and you certainly don't want to be dishonest, but in a lot of cases, that's what you were doing, was caregiving, and you don't have to say they're your own children. I would be honest if it comes up in a resume like, "Oh, can you tell me about this?" But I don't think you should be ashamed either of taking time to care for somebody else.
Couple more.
Yes.
If I'm wanting a career change, but my last employer since 2015 have been call centers.
I'm sorry, because I don't know if everybody can hear that. What'd you say?
Oh, my apologies. Yeah. So from Tina, if I am wanting a career change, but my last employers since 2015 have been call centers, do I need to list them all?
So Tina's asking a good question too, and Tony, feel free, and Aaron, feel free to jump in. The way you know which employers to list is which ones add the most value without creating a gap. So sometimes people will have 2 or 3 jobs that overlap, and some of them were very short. If you can account for the time in some other way, pick whatever's most valuable. Again, consider that all of these will probably be on an application as well. But again, that's why I like to see everything in there to begin with, to see whatever's the strongest to create the best picture overall. Tony, Aaron, do you guys want to add to that?
Yeah, again, if you've done a lot of the same job, then you may want to use a functional type resume. I know we're not talking about those today, but it may actually make more sense to have a different style of resume if you've got a lot of the similar jobs, even if they are with different companies.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think what you said, Carol, was perfect.
And as a side note, Tina, Dylan has one of those. So here I could send you a template. Did we have any other questions about the resume, Aaron, that we missed?
More of just a comment. Sonia, I'm writing a book. I've included that inside my resume, which.
Okay. As long as it adds value to the employer and doesn't detract from what you're looking for, because something extra that's great like that could be distracting in that, oh, well, she's clearly passionate about this other thing. Is she really going to want to do this job? So you'll know better than we will. It sounds like if you're in the higher education world and you've published, you might want to have a CV, which is a lot of the same content, but CVs are generally much longer. Academics, we love to talk with lots of words, right? So they still need to be intentional, but you might want to have a CV so that you can add your book. Not that you couldn't have it on a resume, but that's just something to think about.
Just another comment on that, Carol. Keeping the resume succinct, but actually having your LinkedIn profile. You've got unlimited space on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So you could put a lot more stuff on the LinkedIn profile. Again, you've got that link at the top of your resume or at the top of your cover note. So it's worth thinking about perhaps putting it all on there. And then, because I, as a hiring manager, will certainly want to click on that link and go and see what you've been doing on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah. And yeah, Sonia, I don't know if you want to chronicle a journey of writing a book. I don't know if the resume is a place for that as much as in an interview to talk about your journey, so long as it adds value to the employer. If it's a book about cats and kittens and the life of Trixie, a friend of mine's dad wrote a book about Trixie, the cat. Can't remember the whole name. But you're in a college setting. I don't know if there's a direct connection there as much as if you wrote a book about something that would benefit college students and you work in a college industry, then list it, but I would elaborate probably in person. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, no, just from, Tina, do any of you have any sessions on navigating LinkedIn, like on YouTube? I want to say that Vista del Camino, I believe, Tony, am I correct that you guys offer sessions on LinkedIn specifically, correct?
Absolutely, Aaron. Yes, there's one or two of us that are pretty, without blowing my own trumpet, a little savvy about LinkedIn. So
Very savvy.
we can provide face-to-face consultation or video conferencing, remote. Just make an appointment to see us, and we'll try and shape up your LinkedIn profile for you.
And Aaron, you wouldn't know this, but I'm going to be making videos as well for my YouTube for all of this kind of content. And also I have a class, a career change class that I'm putting together, and it has that content in it. Not that you have to wait for it if Tony's already offering it, but all of that's coming from me as well. And there is a tutorial on LinkedIn about how to set up. So that's also helpful. Okay, be sure, guys, if you're with us right now, I want to talk just a couple of minutes about the cover letter. But if you just joined us and you haven't signed up for the recording yet, please do so on my website so that I can send it all in one place and not go looking lots of places and accidentally skip people. It's just changeyourchannel.life. And all you have to do, you don't have to answer or put any questions in there. Just put your email address, and then I'll know that you want a copy of the recording. So the cover letter, I just want to show you a quick example of what's here. Essentially, the cover letter, you want to use it unless you're told not to. It's another way for you to be very clear about what you're looking for in a job and with the employer, and kind of have a little bit of flattery. At the top, I always like to say, hey, I'm really looking forward, or I'm applying for this job because I admire your company for this reason. This is the kind of experience I bring. You can find lots of these online, but I can find, so Sonia, if you will fill out that form on my website, then I'll know to email you, because I won't have access to this chat when we close it out. So that would be really great. And anybody else who wants the recording, just go to changeyourchannel.life. That would be awesome. The table that you see here, I like it, and then we'll shift over to the interviewing. Works in most government positions. In fact, they look for something like this, but also just in general. What I did is I took the job descriptions, both the minimum and the desired, the bulleted items from the job description, and I put them on the left side. And then on the right side, I just quantify how I meet or exceed them. So if they say they want experience managing other, I say 4 years of experience managing others and then I put like production manager, just so they get a very clear look, and they can at a glance see, wow, this person is not just qualified, but maybe even the most qualified. And then the sentences below, again, kind of ask for a meeting and say, again, I'm interested in working for your company. Let's meet and talk about this. At the end, you'll see a blank line, and then you see sincerely, then you see a blank space, and then you see my name that's typed. Not everybody knows, but if you're going to print this for any reason, or you have the software to do it, the space between sincerely and your name are where you sign. I know when I used to teach this format, people did not know what that was for. And at the very top, you'll notice that I'm using the same header as I used on the resume. Again, that's just so that the top of every page looks the same. I want to point out one little thing, and that is there's a line that you see under the date. That's not supposed to be there. That was just my cursor when I took a screenshot. So that's not the letter I or anything. That's just, I didn't catch that it captured on my screenshot. Okay, do we have any quick questions about the cover letter or resume? We need to roll into interviewing.
A couple people had to go, but just again, thanks for being here. And yeah, hopefully they get to the site, fill out the form, and grab the recording. So thanks, everybody.
So again, the questions, let's see. As far as managing, you don't have to identify them. You can just say family members. You don't have to say which family members. And you don't even have to say family members, really. You could say volunteer caregiver. And really, you're probably, this is a place where I know you have lots and lots of skills that would relate to any employer. But if you have other places that have more directly related skills, like let's say marketing to marketing, that kind of thing, I would maybe not put a lot of bulleted items here. I would talk about, managing schedules, or if you manage medications, whatever skills relate to the new employer, but I would probably keep it brief. You're welcome. Thank you, Lisa. Okay. Tony, Aaron, you want to add anything before we pop over to interviewing?
I would just say that if you're going to include a cover letter, it's a way to enhance how you're going to make that employer successful again.
Thank you for that clarification.
Much more about that than about yourself necessarily, because you've already got most of the information about yourself on your resume, which would be attached. So try and make this a little more about how you can make them successful if they hire you, and unsuccessful if they don't.
Yes. I will say, having been at a government institution, without this table, you may not get an interview.
Right.
I was going to say the same thing. I'm sorry to interrupt. Very good point, Tony. But in the event that you're in a place or environment that calls for something like what you have posted here, Carol, at the very least, it would probably put you in the pile who to interview as opposed to in the trash. So
yeah,
if you summarize everything up front and give it bullet points or right up front for them to read, that you have all the you speak to all the quals right up front.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point, Tony. Make it about the employer, because it makes them happy when they see that you want to work for them. Okay, so I don't know that we have any new folks and folks watching by recording. I'll just ask, is there anybody new who's just joining us right now? Because I want to keep this last part brief. I don't think we have anybody new, but if you are, please let me know. But again, I am Carol Redden. I'm the owner of Change Your Channel, which is the organization hosting today. My background's in higher education for about 20 years, lots of experience helping people make personal and professional development for their lives. And I can't even tell you how many resumes I've looked at and how many employers I've talked with about what they want in a candidate. My degrees are in communication, and I have set up this session today really just to help as many people as possible through this career change. If you are just tuning in or catching any part of this recording now, we're going to talk about interviewing, but I highly recommend going back, watching all of the rest of the session. And I'll turn it over to Aaron and Tony for a quick introduction, and then we'll get right into it. Thank you, Tina and Lisa.
Yeah, thanks again, Carol, for putting this together, and for what you do, and for having me. Bachelor's degree in kinesiology for me, and now a master's in educational leadership. So Last 15 years, worked in higher education. Before that, more as a fitness professional, currently kind of combining both to coach people on their professional development. And again, very thankful to be with you, and as well as Tony.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Coates.
Yes, a retired IT executive with about 40 years experience working for a large pharmaceutical company, AstraZeneca. I was managing quality assurance, information technology, ethics, and process and project management. Since I retired, I've been a volunteer career coach with the city of Scottsdale, and been doing that now for almost, where are we? 6 years. And I also chair the computer learning group that is managed through the Scottsdale city's library function. I'm the chair of the advisory group on that.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. And we mentioned earlier, if you were working on a resume and need some help, please contact those folks. I've talked a few times now about what it means to change your channel, but essentially the channel is the way we experience the world around us. It's made up of our thoughts, feelings, and actions. And so when we change those things, we have the opportunity to change the way we see the world. And that fits into every aspect of our life. It plays into today because before we start the career change process, we want to be really mindful of where our thoughts, feelings, and a willingness to take action are. And if you're watching this, you probably are ready to take some action and have already tuned into your thoughts and feelings. So thanks for joining us. We've talked about personal branding, job searching strategies, resume and cover letter writing, and now we're moving on to interviewing. And I like to keep things in as simple a process as possible. So we'll talk about a few tips before, during, and after the interview. And for our hosts, Tony and Aaron, we probably need to round our conversation out around 12:57 hour, what we're looking at, because there is a delay, and I think it cuts us off at 1 o'clock after 4 hours. We might have to stop about 12:55 because we started a few minutes early. So much like resume writing, you could ask 3 people about how to interview, and you could get 3 different answers. We all, Aaron, Tony and I have facilitated these seminars for a few years now together. Aaron and I think for maybe 4 or so years, but we get a lot of the same questions and a lot of the same fears. And I will say, I taught a lot of communication classes, and the fear of interviewing is a lot like the fear of public speaking, unless or until people are prepared. And then they go, oh, okay, well, it's not that bad. So I think the tendency for most people is to approach an interview like, okay, the night before, I'm going to maybe finish, doing something, and then I'll get together. I would suggest there are lots of things you can do before, things you can do during that make you feel better, so that not just you get an offer, but you have also made sure it's a good place for you, that you're happy with it, that you're paid what you're worth or what you feel your value is. So with that, I always have several tips. I would say, Aaron or Tony, do you want to start us with anything you want to share?
Yeah, I'll throw in definitely before the interview, do some research on the company. Make sure you know what the company is about. They could be just starting off on some new project or new investment, and you want to get involved in that. Then make sure you know about that as some background information. And prepare your answers for some standard questions as well. If you are familiar with the STAR stories approach, if you're not, just simply look that up. STAR, situation, task, activities, and a result. And you can create an answer to a generic question that talks about your career, talks about your work experience. And that in itself answer can be used multiple times if you need to then, because you've rehearsed that STAR story to answer those questions. I guess I'll stop there, given the time.
Sure. Aaron, do you want to add anything for before the interview?
Yeah, first of all, I apologize. My AC just kicked on, so if you guys can hear that,
no.
Sorry, that must mean it's getting hot out. in addition to what you and Tony said, me being the, kind of taking the holistic approach, any as far as researching the company, material, the STAR method, all that, but anything that help ground you or kind of any mindfulness or things that will keep you in the moment, such as breathing exercises, things like that, minimizing stress and distractions before, or, maybe even the day before. So all those things as well. Just really quick. Just wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we can talk through some specifics, certainly, because again, these sessions today were ordered in the way they were on purpose. So ideally, you would put some of the self-exploration work in advance. And each step of the way, you get a little bit more clear about who you are and what you want, so that you figure out who you are and what you want before you spend time looking for jobs. And remember, we said while you're looking for jobs, research the company. Don't just apply willy-nilly. Research the job. Make sure you understand what the language is inside the job description, and that those are things you can do and you're able to either do them or learn them. And then talk about them and market yourself. Put all of that into your resume. If you get an interview, it's because your resume sold them on you, right? So one big piece of advice I would have, in addition to the things already mentioned, is really practice how to use your resume to answer questions. I'm not a big proponent on memorizing answers. I do think it's helpful to familiarize yourself. You can Google top interview questions. And so I do think it's helpful to kind of practice or think about what you would say, but I wouldn't worry about memorizing, for the same reason I don't say memorize a speech, because put under pressure, you could lose it and then you look, stressed out. So staying in the moment, as Aaron said, as you prepare before in each of these phases, the day of the interview, you should feel a little bit better. But I would say do prepare 3 questions. We talked about this, I think, in the job searching section with Mariah. She was interested in knowing about the company's culture. And I said, if you couldn't figure it out from the website, then the interview is a great time to talk about it. If you can figure it out from the website and you have questions, those are great questions to bring up in the interview, right? To get some elaboration on those. I would also say prepare your attire in advance, meaning what you're going to wear. Try it on. I don't know if you guys have any stories like this, but I've had students tell me men especially tell me they didn't try on a jacket, put on a few pounds, and then they went to put it on and it did not fit. I had a story one time. I did not think through my choices very carefully. Shout out to the Tillman Foundation. They're probably not watching, but I went to an interview there many years ago, and I was wearing a skirt and jacket, like a suit. And I didn't think through, very pale. I'm natural, you can see. But I thought, I want to look my best. So I put on some tanning lotion the morning of, I think early that morning, thinking I would look great, but I didn't realize how hot the suit would be. And then in sitting in Miss Marie Tillman's office, I began to sweat quite a bit, which is normally not super problematic, right? You can just kind of play it cool and, do one of these or whatever. But the back of my legs were sweating, and also would not be problematic, except that she had white slip covers over her chairs. And I never had the heart to look back at the slip covers to see if I ruined them, but I feel like I might have, because I could tell that tanning lotion was just running. So it's a little too much information, I think, but I'm willing to share it because I did not think through my choices. It was a very hot outfit, and I didn't, I'm pretty confident talking, but I still must have gotten nervous or whatever. And so that was something that did not work out super well for me. Okay. So we got some feedback on our session. I can see that it's still appearing live. But did you guys want to add anything? Will I check on this?
About the attire. I mean, once you have a general idea of how you are supposed to dress for that particular interview, try on the clothes and get some clothes that fit and that you feel comfortable in. Because if you feel comfortable, you're going to perform much better. If you're already, feeling good about yourself in those clothes,
Mm-hmm.
I just do believe that you're going to perform better. Something about, if you feel good and look good, I do think that is part of your performance.
Yeah, and sometimes people ask, what should I wear? I would say try to think through whatever the brand. This is why we talked about branding at the beginning. Think about what people in that office or location are already wearing at whatever level you would be going in at, right? Maybe though you add a jacket. Jacket's pretty standard for an interview, unless it's like a maintenance job. I certainly would not suggest, which sometimes people will come to my sessions and they're like, why would I wear a jacket for that? Okay, then maybe not. But generally speaking, a jacket's a good idea. But as far as makeup, jewelry, perfume, in most cases, keep it conservative. I've had more than one attorney tell me they did not like when candidates would wear red. And I know red's, considered a power color. But, things like gray, black, white, blue, those are much more standard for sure. Sorry, I have my cats wanting to join us again. And choose something that makes you happy. By the way, Lisette, fun fact, I'm told that teal looks good on everybody. So if you have some teal, it's a nice calming color. But sorting it out in advance helps you not worry about what if the iron messed it up, or what if your iron stopped working. My iron stopped working the other day. If I had waited the day before an interview, I'd have been out of luck. Tony, do you have any stories?
Yeah, we use the phrase "dress for success," and I'm sure that's used elsewhere. But I wouldn't wear a tie. I'm not wearing a tie today, but I feel like I'm in a business casual environment. So this is how I feel comfortable. To Aaron's point, would I then be putting a tie on for today's event or for an interview? Probably not, because this is me. And the types of job I would be going for don't necessarily require a tie. It looks like your sharing presentations just dropped, but that's okay.
Oh, I moved it on purpose. So because I think I don't know that they need the visual for that. So I think it's a little more impactful this way.
So absolutely, it's about being comfortable, knowing what you want to actually speak about. As Carol said, don't memorize it, but certainly have some bullet points. A good tip, if you're in an interview and it's an online interview through a video conference or something, you can have your notes in front of you. I've got notes in front of me right now, but no one knows that unless I tell you that. So that's another thing, in terms of preparation, have that.
Hold on. Sorry, my cat's wanting to be the star of the show again. He never needs to be up here unless I'm doing this. I have the same. I got this specifically I have my notes for today too, and I don't mind showing you because I wanted to be prepared and also stay on track. The way I work a resume, just in case my cat shows up, he doesn't need anything. He just wants to get from one side of the desk to the other. What I do is when I make a resume and then I apply for a job and find out I get an interview, I promptly take that job description that I used to create my resume back out and I annotate it. So I look for keywords, I circle them and I point out, if I said on my resume, I've done this for 7 years and they asked for it in the job description as like a desired qualification, there's a good chance they'll ask me about it. So I don't just take my resume and have it handy. I also have a marked up resume with my notes on it. And I'll add other things that maybe I thought about and I forgot to put on my resume. Absolutely. There are some employers. I was reading an article this morning. Rachel posted this on LinkedIn from Anna Winters. She was talking about the things she looks for, and it's not necessarily what people wear, but kind of who they are and if they're prepared and that kind of thing. Oh gosh, now I have forgotten my train of thought. Now I have forgotten my train of thought. Was I talking about questions? Anybody?
We're talking about preparing for an interview, I think, but
I was talking about annotating my resume. Right. Because if you've done the work, I believe this is what I was going to say. She was talking about she looks for a few kind of who the person is, like what book you're reading and that kind of thing. And those questions can come up that probably won't be on your resume. And those are fine that you should know the answer to. But But generally speaking, most of their questions are going to be about why are you the best candidate? And oftentimes those answers are on your resume. They want you to elaborate. They saw something or a few things that they want to know more about. So you will do yourself a huge favor by really understanding what's on your resume and why. That's what I was going to say. I also recommend making sure you know where you're going for the interview, if it's at a physical location, and getting there 5 to 10 minutes, no more, no less early. I say 10 minutes, and I'd say, it's a good idea to maybe wait in the parking lot for a few minutes, get your bearings, cool down a little bit. But I always say if it's a physical location, start paying attention to your surroundings within about a 5-mile radius, because it could be the person driving next to you, the person you cut off or cut you off, the person in the restroom. Anybody you're interacting with prior to your interview could be the person interviewing you. And certainly the person checking you in, if there is such a person, whether it's virtually or at a desk, there's very often times when that person gets to give input on whether or not the candidate is hired. So I wouldn't be having stressful conversations in the parking lot, trying to manage kids or taxes or anything like that at, the site of the interview. And as Tony said, if it's virtual, most of all of this applies. I recommend to go ahead and put on the full outfit. Don't just put on the top half, put on the professional bottom half too. So you feel good and it changes your dynamics, as Aaron said. But then also go ahead and log in a couple minutes early. You don't want everybody sitting there waiting for you. I have a few more things, but this is, again, some things you can prepare before. Do you guys want to add anything else before the interview?
Okay. I'd like to say, just from our conversation, you can see how much we feel how important that preparation is. All of the things we've just said for the last 20 minutes are all about before the interview. As they say, plan, 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 and then the execution is easier.
Yeah, and I want to touch on Lizette's comment about making sure pets are in the other room. I totally agree. However, I would say I don't, partly because if I put my cats in behind a closed door, you will think I've trapped a person. It becomes a very loud thing. They will bang on the door until I let them out, and they will scream. So it's less distracting. But in an interview, if you have, that's a great point. If you have, it's a virtual, you have a pet or a cat, this is the world we live in. I mean, a pet or a child, this is just real life. I mean, minimize to the extent you can, for sure. But because I'm in the moment interacting with you guys, I'm not worried about being perfect or what if you think I'm perfect. Much like public speaking, you have two choices. You can either focus on the audience or you can focus on yourself. You cannot do both. Great public speakers and people who interview well focus on the other people in the room. So if my cat or say a child comes into play and I'm talking to you guys and I just keep on about my business and this is a good thing, funny, and I just keep going on, it's not great, but it's not the end of the world. It would be much worse if I freaked out and kept trying to put my cat away and made it a whole thing, or got upset at a kid, or, do your best regardless of what happens, and just keep going. Stay in the moment. And this is where preparation helps, as Tony said, Aaron said. That preparation, I can't stress it enough, should allow you to feel like you're doing what I'm doing now, which is just talking to people. And if somebody brought up earlier, that's not necessarily comfortable for everybody, then all the more reason to prepare, because then you're comfortable with those words coming out of your mouth. Have somebody quiz you on, so I see here you worked in the industry for 7 years. Tell me about that. You should be able to succinctly or briefly talk about, I worked at, you decide whether you want to say companies' names, or you can say, yes, I've worked in these job titles. I've done very well. I've grown, right? It's all on your resume in most cases. There's so much we could say to talk about for resumes. I also wanted to say something that always comes up are not always your area of strength, but you should know those. And oftentimes you'll be asked about a weakness. I prefer, when answering that, not to repeat it and say, well, one of my weaknesses is, and I instead would say an area of opportunity I have is. And of course, one of your areas of opportunity could be the one skill or technology you knew you didn't have when you applied for the job. That's why you only met 95% of the criteria. So that's okay to refer back to say, well, I know that you guys are going to start using this XYZ software and my existing company hasn't yet purchased it. You don't just leave it there. You say, so that's something I'm really looking forward to learning. And then you've reframed it. And they might dig a little bit and say, no, tell me something you're not great at. Okay, so maybe start thinking about that. But still, it doesn't have to be something you go, well, I'm just not a people person. And then you leave it at that. I would not offer that anyway. But if there was something you weren't great at, talk about how you're overcoming it, or it's important to you to try it, or you're in the process of learning it, that kind of thing. That's something you often will want to do to prepare. Any thoughts on that, guys?
I do agree with you there. So good point.
Sorry to interrupt, Aaron. Yeah, I absolutely. You were definitely going to get a question about tell me where you have a development opportunity, or however they phrase it. And you've got to make that a positive. You've got to turn it around and say, yes, perhaps I'm not so good at Microsoft Word, but I've been taking this class, and I feel like I'm learning quicker than I was doing. So I'm getting prepared for that.
I've taken it upon myself.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It shows initiative. It shows the fact that you're able to learn and willing to learn. And therefore, that's a good, you've turned that development opportunity into a positive statement.
Right. Yep. I fully agree. It's how you frame it. And then just to transition into the during, as Tony talked about, there's something called the STAR method. And those are for behavioral questions. So if somebody says, you witnessed this or you experienced this, how would you, or tell me about a time when you did handle this? Oftentimes, those questions are related to things like ethics. They want to know if you're an ethical person, or they might want to know how well you manage your time. But also, the other side of that is they often relate to the jobs they want you to do. So tell me about a time when you had to work on a project and then a new deadline came up. How did you handle that? If you really understand what's in your resume and you think about the STAR method, which is in the moment, you go, okay, here's the situation. Here was the action we took, or I'm sorry, the task at hand. Here's what we were kind of, the importance of it. Here are the actions that we took, and then here were the results. They might ask for a time when the results were not great, and what did you learn from it? So it's helpful to think about just applying the STAR method for practice, even if you don't know what kind of behavioral question you're going to get asked, just to make sure you remember the ST, the A, the R.
Really quick, Carol, are you so having that and using that approach as opposed to just answering like in theory I would do this? Obviously the STAR method would be a much better, because it actually shows that you've gone through something, right? As opposed to like, this is what I would do.
I think most employers want an actual example.
Yeah.
There have been times when I could not think of an example. And so I had to give a hypothetical and say, here's something similar. I think if I were put in that situation, here's what I would do. Or I can explain the variables. But it's a good reminder to say it's okay to take time and ask to think about it, to say, I'm not sure I've had that. You do want to try to come up with an example because there's a reason they asked that. But the best I could do in some of my cases is say, here's the closest thing I've had happen. And if this different variable happened, here's what I would do about that, or what I would anticipate.
Yeah, it goes back to some of the preparation as well. You can actually already have created those stories, and made some notes. And as we said before, you can actually have your notes with you to remind you, or you could already have, apply that. So yes, rather than using a hypothetical, you can say, well, it actually, not quite the same thing, but here's what I did in a similar situation, or here's what I did. It's all about what you've done and how you've learned from it and what the results were. Not just to say, oh, well, I've read a book and this is how I'm supposed to do it, but give an example of what you actually personally have done.
My teacher told me.
exactly. And the other one that comes out a lot is the I and the we. So, tell me about a time when you were in a project and one of the project team members wasn't pulling their weight. What did you do about it? Well, we did this and we did that, and in the end, we did that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, but what did you do personally? Well, actually, I just assisted the project manager. So now you see you've given it away that you didn't really do much.
Mm-hmm.
So have a better example. Try and stay away from the we and make sure it's an I as much as you can.
Well, and I think that's a good, if you're ever unclear, it's totally okay to ask for clarifying or clarification. And it's always a good idea. If you answered and you aren't sure, I would, before moving on, ask, have I answered your question? Because you want to be able to address it before you move on. But I think the other larger issue with interviews is nobody's expecting perfection. They are expecting to get to know you. I have had employers tell me, they want somebody who's very personable, or they want someone who pays attention to detail. So I worked at a campus one time where you kind of had to weave through the building. And I had a boss one time at that campus who would intentionally take the long way around and watch how the candidate interacted with other people on the campus. Because if the candidate was very just sort of afraid or stoic, or because they don't know if it's because you're afraid or not unpleasant, that's very different than if everyone I meet, I go, oh, hi. And they're saying hi to me and I'm in the moment and I'm paying attention. I'm giving them a sense of who I am as we get to the office. I'm showing them. And another employer talked one time about, I'm sure I have lots of these, but having a sheet of paper kind of under the chair or something out of place. So with the hopes that the candidate would go, oh my gosh, this thing is here. And then they would check to see, did they read it? Does it, because the natural instinct just go, oh, your paper. Sorry, it's your bank statement. And not that there's a right or a wrong necessarily, but if you're in the moment, you're able to do yourself a favor and then just interact with that person the way you would anybody else. And again, that's preparation is really the key for that.
Yeah, I think you're right, Carol, because at the moment you step in that door, if it's a physical location, the moment you step in that door, you're in the interview.
And it can be,
whether it's the receptionist at the front desk, as you said earlier, whether
yes,
it's the manager touring you around all of the office buildings until you finally get to the office, you're on the interview all the time, and you're being watched.
and
so be aware of that.
And even possibly in the parking lot. I also worked at a campus where the whole front of the campus was glass. And there were always people just watching, like people who were not even part of the hiring process, just watching, because people will do the darndest things when they think no one's watching, right? They're, again, fighting with somebody on the phone or cursing somebody out or all kinds of things. I was going to mention something too when you were just talking about that. I can't tell you how many times I've run into my interviewer or somebody on a panel in the restroom. As before I go into any interview, I try to stop by the restroom, make sure everything's great, nothing's there that's not supposed to be. I do a full-on check. Also, I go to the restroom just to make sure I feel comfortable, and I take a minute to breathe, and I'll wash my hands with cold water if I need to calm down a little bit. But so many times I run into that person not knowing. And if I do run into someone in the restroom, I make conversation anyway in an appropriate way, but I will almost always say, oh, great shoes, or, oh, hey, it's so hot out, or something. And it's always worked to my benefit because turns out that person is in the middle of interviews too, and is there in that same block of time. If I had just been worried about myself or stressed out or grumpy on the phone or whatever, that would have been that person's first impression.
Just a comment, then a question that came through. I was just going to say, generally speaking, being prepared leads to confidence. And you obviously can't prepare for everything, but yeah. I think if you are, it's easier to adapt in that moment because as opposed to being so unprepared that you can't adapt should anything unusual happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also, question coming through: should there be a point that you should tone down who you are during the interview? It's from Tina. Knowing me, Carol, and my enthusiasm, should I consciously tone that down in an interview? My quick response would be,
Yeah, let's hear
you
it.
should probably be interviewing at places that embrace enthusiasm in any ways, because going back to personal branding, etc. But
Yes.
so maybe sometimes, perhaps, but generally speaking, if that's who you are, you should be interviewing at places that want to see that.
That's exactly what I would say, Aaron. We're now sharing a brain. Yeah, because who you are is going to come through. And if those are all people who don't appreciate enthusiasm in a job interview, and you're leaving one career to start another, like, come on, do you want to work with those people? I think certainly there's something to be said though for matching. I always will try to like mirror, but I have, especially in a panel, sometimes that's tricky because let's be honest, most people don't like interviewing. Nobody wants to be interviewed or do the interviewing. It's not a fun thing. So I've been in panels before where everybody's just kind of like this, like, come on, you're the fifth person a day. Let's get through this. And I kind of want to censor myself and kind of match their level. But then there are times when it feels, the vibration feels so low to me. I don't want to go there. And I just think, and this is probably true for you, Tina, because I know you, your energy will probably brighten their day. And if they're smart, they'll go, that's what we want. We want somebody who answers the phone like that or greets customers like that. And I think if you try to tone it down, you don't give them a look at who you are. To Aaron's point, I would find a job where they go, that's the person we need. She's a ball of sunshine. She's a hard worker. She does, everything we ask above and beyond. That's who we need. So I would maybe be mindful, but I don't think I would change it. Tony?
Yeah, absolutely. You can't be someone else. Not and be true.
No.
It will come through if you try and be someone else. So you've got
Yeah.
to be yourself. You've got to be able to manage how that comes across, and you can't try and be someone else by toning something down, or even going the other way and trying to tone it up.
Yeah.
You've got to be your own self, as we talked about earlier.
Absolutely. And I hope that answers your question, Tina. But for anybody who's with us still, feel free to ask more. We still have like another 15 minutes or so. But with a larger group, it's hard to get through all the questions, but we have a smaller group with us. I wanted to talk a little bit about how to manage yourself on camera, because again, I've done virtual interviews with people, and again, I teach public speaking virtually. And so many times the person on the other side does not appear to think through their nonverbal choices, which is, what does the lighting look like? What's in the background? Who's in the background? Lisette talked to this just a little bit about, try to minimize pets and other people. To that, just a really quick side note too. It doesn't happen so much these days, but if you're ever job searching, I recommend you be the one that answers the phone. And if you do share a phone with somebody for some reason, make sure they know you're job searching and don't answer the phone like, who's this? Or something like that. I've done that a few times when I call the person and I get like an abrupt somebody else on the phone. I'm like, okay, I must have the wrong number because thought I was calling Susan and she doesn't sound like that. And so it took me back a bit. But for your anything virtual, whether it's an informational interview or an actual interview, I would say just be mindful of all of this. My mom came over and helped me situate all this. And then Mom, you might think it's funny that we spent time working on this and then not all of it's on camera because there's 3 of us. That's okay. But, Aaron could have that fan on, his ceiling fan on, but sometimes it creates distraction. So I would maybe turn that off, things like that. And I started to do this earlier because it's a long 4 hours, but hopefully in like a half an hour or longer interview, you don't fall into one of these where you get so comfortable. I've seen people do this even in person and they just kind of sink into their chair and you're like, what happened? Where are you right now? So you want to try to make sure you're at least in the camera as much as possible in an appropriate way. So your posture is great. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it should just be at least comfortable. And even if you're in person too, I don't think you need to be one of these where you're, staring at them and have perfect posture, because that just seems unnatural. And again, preparation will allow you to relax a little bit.
I would say, Carol, try and position the videos of the people or person that you're looking at just underneath your camera, if you can, on the screen. Move that window around so that I'm not looking down here at this, and I'm talking to this person down here because I'm looking at their picture. I'm looking more at the, straight on. As you say, you can't be staring, into the camera, because that doesn't look natural either. But
yeah, well, I like that you're bringing me back to the other thing I mentioned to people is to make sure your camera is high enough so that your camera is as close to your eye level as possible, so that you're not looking down at everybody. But I try to, like, just today, occasionally I'll find myself looking at Tony and Aaron over here, and then I realize people watching the recording don't get my eye contact. So I do try to just go and look at the camera a little bit, but I don't want to be staring. I want to be thinking of the person who's talking, so that the person gets eye contact. Like in this case, I can't move these icons, but yes, if you can, that's much recommended for sure. Also test your system. Usually they'll tell you if it's going to be Zoom or whatever first. If you can test it out on your end to make sure your mic works, your camera works, that kind of thing. I know these seem like little things, but if you haven't job searched in a while and now you're using Zoom to do an interview, I could see that throwing somebody off, because people are, I was posted yesterday about the Great Resignation. People are leaving in droves because they're not being treated the way they believe they should be. And I think rightly so. I mentioned this earlier on the call. Our job is just a piece of our lives. It's not meant to be our entire lives. I think that's true probably for all jobs. Some people, like, there's a Tony Robbins or a Lewis Howes or what have you. But I would say even they strive for like a work-life balance, and maybe even prioritize it better than some other people because they know the importance of it. So what we're trying to do with this series is to help people be mindful about and engaged in the process, change their thoughts, their feelings, and actions to support their long-term goals and overall happiness, so that the career is not just something they have to do. And by the way, I think it's helpful to talk really quickly about salary, because there's always a lot of confusion about how to bring that up, when to bring that up. Generally, the rule would be it doesn't come up in a first interview unless the employer says, I love you, you're amazing, I want you to start tomorrow. For the person who's never been in that situation, one way to handle that would be to say, thank you so much. Can you tell me about the offer? Early on in my career, I think I accepted 2 different jobs without knowing what I was being paid. I don't know if you guys ever did that, but I was like, oh, great. I was so happy to have a job. And then I would call somebody and like, how much are you making? I'm like, I don't know. I didn't even ask. That's not great. So there's a whole conversation that can be had, but generally the interviewer or the person being interviewed does not bring it up, but you should be comfortable about talking with it. You should know the average salary for the job, and you should feel comfortable saying, like, if Tony's interviewing me and I think I'm worth 60, this happened to me one time, roughly, I'm going to just play with the numbers here. Tony offers me 40 and I think I'm worth 60. That's a huge gap. I need to be able to talk about. So the game that sometimes is played is the employer will say, if I say, great, can you tell me about the salary or the benefit package? And he can say, well, what salary were you looking for? That's a really common way to get me to say a very low number. So whether he does it that way or some other way it comes out, I would be able to answer that with, well, I know the average salary is 47, and I know I've been doing this for 15 years, and I know I'm a proven leader. I have this, this, and this. So I would say 60 would be in the range of what would be fair. Or what have I said in the past? Something that demonstrates my value. And how do you argue with demonstrating my value? I mean, he could just say, we don't have it. And then I go, okay, well, tell me what we can do. Or I can say, oh, well, thank you so much. But as soon as I talk about my value as a person and what I bring to the company, and then I just laid it out for him, it's really hard to say, yeah, but I really want you to do it for 40. Right? I'm so glad, Lisette. Thank you so much for joining us. Did you guys want to add to the salary conversation?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes if it does come up, you can use phrases like, well, I would expect to be paid what's commensurate for this position, or equivalent to similar people in the organization that you already are employing. If they want to know a specific number, then I think your answer was a great way to answer it. But you can avoid answering a direct number question by using other techniques
Sure.
to just say. That's all I would add.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You don't have to go right to the money, but I also want to point out that I talked about the benefit package, because keep in mind, as Aaron said early on, sometimes it's not just the salary. Sometimes they'll say, well, we don't have a lot of money, so our cap is 45, but we can give you 4 weeks off. We can give you 401k, blah, blah, blah. And then when you put it all together, that's why it's called a package. You go, you know what? Okay. Right? So you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot by just focusing on the salary either.
Yeah. There may be sign-on bonuses, there may be long-term incentive awards, share options, things like that. So if they're offering things like that, you do need to sort of add that together in the total compensation package. Yeah.
And even if it seems like you're going to get a low introductory rate that you're willing to accept, be mindful that you just said you're willing to accept it. So you can't really complain about it later if you said you'll accept it. But you can say, I'd be willing to start at that with the agreement of a 30 or a 90-day review, and the understanding that if I outperform, we go to this number. And somehow that's in writing, right? Sometimes that's possible, sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
Aaron?
Just a question coming through from Tina. Can you say what your previous position paid?
Oh, yeah, I think you can. I think that's a good way to go. However, it sort of pits one employer against another. So I wouldn't maybe name a company. I might say I was making this in the past. But again, those other companies might not have paid you what you're worth. So on Indeed.com, and I think there's a salary.com, you can look at the average. I would always look at that before you go into an interview, because there's a good chance. Now, if you're already being paid more than the average, I would say I'm making X currently, especially if they've offered you something that's a little lower. One time I was asked to take a leadership job kind of in a pinch. And I said, well, I'd like to know the offer. And they said, what's it going to take? And I said, well, I'm making this now, and this is higher level. I'd like this. And on the spot, they said, okay. I mean, it was a good amount. And I went a little high on purpose because I thought they might talk me down. And then once I had that amount in every other job, I could say, well, I was just making this amount. Right. So if it's higher, then sure, I just wouldn't name a name probably, because then it seems like you're pitting them against each other. But if you have been paid lower than the average, I wouldn't offer what you made past. I would redirect it and say, here's what I believe the average is. I know I am on the higher end of that. And so I would talk about your value.
I think adding to that same question though, the prospective hiring manager may already know what you were hiring at that previous job. They may already have reached out to the reference. If you provided a reference, they may, in my company, we were, when asked for a reference, we were only allowed to say, Carol worked for me in my team from this date to this date, and her salary was X, Y, Z, and that's all I can tell you. I'm not allowed to say she was great or she was rubbish or anything like that. But they may already have confirmed what your salary and your position was already. So be careful about, going too high if you're not.
Sure.
If you're trying to get that raise on the incoming process.
That's a good point. I've never had that, but I've never had super high level employment. I don't know that everybody needs to check the salary of anybody in education. We're not in medical. We're no AstraZeneca, but it's possible. Yeah.
I had a colleague that moved from our company to another company, and because he'd not been with us for more than 3 years, he was losing his vesting pension. 401k, whatever. And one of his negotiating tactics at this new company was, well, I'm leaving this amount of money behind by coming to you at this point in time. So let's talk about making me whole.
That's so great.
That was a great negotiating tactic for salary or sign-on bonus or whatever.
Yeah, that's so great. Do we have any other questions? And I will just throw that out as like a final call for questions. And Aaron, do you want to add anything?
No, all just really good points. I think at the very least, know your value. So that way you can speak to that and verbally and through your actions. So all good points.
Awesome. Tony, would you like to have any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
No, I think this has been a really good session. I hope folks have got a lot out of it. We're here to help, as you said, Carol. So do sign on to her website and make sure you get a copy of the video. It's been a great session.
Thank you so much to both of you for joining me. It's something that I actually wanted to try to do for more than 4 hours, but LinkedIn has a cap. But now that we've done it for 4 hours, I think it's a pretty long time. So I know that you both have lots of things. Your schedule's very busy, but I also knew that you were very knowledgeable and add a lot of value, both in your coaching experience with personal and professional development for folks. So I really appreciate your time. I like having your perspective. And thank you to those who've joined us live, either for some or all of the time. I very much appreciate your comments. Those, sort of drive our conversation. I mean, we prepared content, but your questions drive a lot of it. So yeah, I would just say for anybody who would like the recording, I'll leave the link up for another day or so. And you don't have to buy anything or do anything. Just let me know that you want it by giving me your email address. And if you want to stay connected, we can connect on LinkedIn, or that's my Facebook, Change Your Channel page. Also YouTube, as I mentioned, I will have more YouTube videos coming soon, as well as a course, a career change course, individual coaching and then group coaching. Different people have different needs. So, that's fine. But I want to thank everybody for joining me. And I would say have a great rest of your afternoon, everybody. Tax day is behind us. So with that, I will say we'll sign off for now. And it's a great day to change your channel if you haven't already.
Yeah.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for joining us.